Game of Thrones, The Scheming Baratheon. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction. So don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 151, Raymond and Rhaenys. Catelyn did not know what to do at the moment. Since this was Edward's arrangement, she could not say no to that. But she did not want Arya to behave like a ruffian like that. She wanted her daughter to act like a proper lady. At that time, the other brat came to save the situation. The always unruly child, William, came to speak in Arya and Brienne's favor while giving Catelyn an exit. He knew that the Starks would be his family if he married Arya, so he did not mind saving Catelyn from this awkward situation. You don't have to worry, Lady Stark. Sir Brienne of Tarth, or as my father always liked to call her, Dame Brienne of Tarth, is a reliable person. What do you think of this? Could I have Arya as my guide around Winterfell? I wanted to see the castle that my father likes to visit a lot. It had been long since I came here, said William with a smile on his face. The little brat was more tactful like Ashra. He knew how to get what he wanted with a smile. He did not take anything from Edward at all. If Edward did not force him to train and learn, he was sure that the brat would go missing for God knows how long. That was why Edward decided to be a little more strict in dealing with this brat who caused him a headache every time Edward saw him. If the little guy did not take Ashra's features, Edward would say that he was not his son. His other sons and daughters were more like Edward than Ashra, who would solve their problems with a scheme or force if required. But this brat would just smile it off. That was what annoyed Edward the most. Well, his son might not even have any interest in anything at all, even women, since he only saw traveling as his only interest. If you say it like that, Prince William, said Catelyn as she thought about it for a little. At least, getting close to the prince and knowing him better was the best way to get rid of Arya. If Arya managed to marry the prince, she would have saved Catelyn from much trouble. I am grateful for your generosity, Lady Stark. Come on, Arya. We have a lot to do. You too, Lady Brienne. You can protect me while the father is away with Lord Stark, said William with a smile as he called Arya with her boyish name, getting her angry before saying those words to Brienne. Although William's brothers did not like how irresponsible he was all the time, they still loved this baby brother of theirs. Edward always wanted to let his sons be closer to each other and did not wish the power to get over their heads. You all talked about him naming an heir would solve the succession war, but look at the history. Aegon Targaryen had named his son Rhaenys Targaryen as his heir, but he got killed by Aegon's sister and wife. He got replaced by his brother at the end. The war then started between Rhaenys' sons and Rhaegar Targaryen, Rhaenys' brother. Edward had come up with several ideas to solve this problem, but the best way to solve this was magic. He instructed the previous group to find a way to measure everyone's potential and character to see who was fit to be the king. Till the group found a way, Edward had to make the relationship between the brothers strong, so Edward threw them in the war zone where they would have to fight side by side if they wanted to survive. He even used them in the fighting bed in Meereen. Plus, he made them spend 2 years impersonating as smallfolks or merchants to let them judge the situation from the front seat. That was why the relationship between Edward's sons was quite good. Even if they had disagreements, there were 2 ways to solve those: by a peaceful talk with the other brothers as witnesses, or a fight with bare hands if the talking did not give them any satisfying results. Although at that time, the one who trained more than the other since he came to this world earlier would have to use one hand, or so. William was the youngest amongst the boys, while Jasmine was the youngest girl. That was why the brothers took good care of William and Teresa while they all doted on Jasmine, for that was why they allowed William to behave like that. Raymond, the oldest son of Edward and William's oldest brother, came close to the group. He would help his brother this time since Arya would be his wife in the future. Don't worry about them, Lady Stark. They are just children playing here and there, said Raymond with a smile. Raymond had inherited a lot from Edward and Ashra, but the boy preferred to act like his father. He grew up among his father's achievements here and there. That was why he and Axel were the ones who took the words of their father seriously. They would listen to everything he taught them and train as if there was no tomorrow. That was the reason why Edward was proud of those 2 who did not disappoint him even once. If you say so, Prince Raymond. Please, follow Rob. He would take you all to where you would sleep," said Catelyn with a smile. She could not refuse anything that came from Raymond's mouth. Not only was the young man the crown prince of the Kingdom of Storms, but he was a handsome young man that made every maiden in Westeros fell in love with him from the first glance. Catelyn did not know that, but Raymond had already married 2 years ago, and he was expecting his first child to come to this world any time now. No one in Westeros knew about this information since the one he married was none other than one of the 2 remaining female Targaryen. Yet, as you all heard, Raymond had married Rhaenys Targaryen, the daughter of Rhaegar Targaryen and Elia Martell, who Edward had been taking care of all that time. Of course, Edward did not hide anything from her since he did not want to face any kind of problems related to that topic. Since the girl was well protected and Edward did not allow her to go outside the keep, she did not hear the rumors about her origins. Actually, no one knew about her identity except a handful of people. Edward had dyed her hair black after he received the girl from Varys. She did not even know that she was Rhaegar's daughter. She only knew that she had a mother that she got separated from at her young age. Chapter 152, Who is Better? But Edward allowed her to meet him when she was 16 years old. By that time, Raymond and Rhaenys were in love. Edward had always worked on their relationship so that they could get close. And they did. The 2 of them had been in love for 4 years before that meeting. It was a good chance for Edward to tell the naive Targaryen girl about her past. Although nothing would go this smoothly since she could not accept that the man who cared about her as if he was her actual father all that time was the one who killed her biological father. No one would accept something like that unless they were as naive as Sansa back then, who tried to get close to Joffrey after he killed Ned Stark. But after she heard the whole story, she calmed down a little. She did not expect her biological father to betray her poor mother like that and kidnapped her adoptive father's friend and caused her death as well. She started to figure that her mother's death was because of her father and grandfather and hated them to her core. Although Rhaegar loved Rhaenys and showered her with love, she was very young when all that happened and did not remember that. She was only 1 year old at that time. After that year, Rhaegar got occupied by Lyanna and did not see anyone else in his eyes. The only ones who cared about the young girl were her mother and grandmother. She had a complicated feeling about Edward after listening to everything Edward said since she did not know if she should hate him or thank him for saving her and trying to save her mother. But after some of Raymond's persuasion, she started to see that Edward had only hidden her to protect her, especially after the special treatment she received from Raymond on their bed with many rounds of banging. She knew that Edward could have killed her himself when she was young, but he raised her as she was his daughter and allowed her to love his son like that. Raymond was his father's son at that time. Although he loved Rhaenys from all his heart, his father's teaching was above all. He knew how he could take the chance and play with Rhaenys' feelings for the greater good. Some of you might say that this was not true love. If he loved her from all his heart as it was said earlier, he should not deceive her. But by doing so, he protected her, and that was enough. Would she suffer if she did not know? No, but on the contrary, she would live happily the same way she did before she heard about her origins too. Back to William and the group. After Lady Stark allowed Arya to go with William and Brienne, she went with the steward to prepare everything required for the feast at night. As for Arya, who already gained her freedom from Lady Stark, she followed William as they moved throughout the castle. "Wait for me, you two," said the third little devil in Edward's eyes. If her twin brother was about to go and have fun around the castle, how could she not go along? The triple devils must act together in her eyes. "Oh, Teresa, you want to come with us?" said William with a smile. Teresa was the closest one to him since they were twins. Lucky for Edward, both the twins did not have the habit of exploring sex with each other like the Lannister. After the twin came to light, Edward was so afraid of this fact. Of course, he knew that not every twin was like the Lannisters, but he wanted to make sure that something like that would never happen. The twin Lannister was already a disaster that almost fucked up all Westeros. And Edward did not want such a thing to happen between his children. Although Edward knew how important pure blood was, especially for the blood rituals he performed, he despised such acts and would not allow his children to do such things, at least in his generation. Edward could not control his future descendants, so all he could write at the moment was to prevent his children and making them hate such acts too. Edward had ordered many maids to pay close attention to the two's activities since he did not want to repeat such tragedies. He also separated the two in every possible way. Edward could not allow them to get that close to each other. And Edward's plans worked. In the past 11 years, the twins did not get intimate with each other in such a way. And every one of them had built his interests. William would travel while Teresa would train with a bow. That was her passion, so Edward allowed her to learn from the most proficient archer in his men, Robin Hood. "Teresa, you are her as well," said Arya as she got close to the girl at once. Those two hid it when they first saw each other. William was the insider in this relationship since Arya talked to him at first because of Teresa. "Ari, it is great to see you again," said Teresa as she hugged Arya with a smile. Arya was her favorite here in the north. That was why she would like to spend time with her instead of the other gloomy Starks. "You already met Dame Brienne. She is amazing, isn't she? But Dame Corinna is way much better, though," said the young girl with a pout. Since Corinna was the one who followed her since the beginning, she took her side. Actually, this topic circled the noble, and everyone started to pick a side to support. Edward did not know whether to laugh or cry after hearing about those debates. The problem was that the topic did not stay among the noble, but even the small folk started to talk about it since it was an intriguing topic. The first female knight in the kingdom or the first female kingsguard to join Edward's kingsguard? Everyone had to pick a side to support. Since the two involved in this debate were among the most powerful in the kingdom and females, the discussions and arguments continued to escalate further and further. Chapter 153, Rivalry between Teresa and William. Even Edward's children started to pick a side. Of course, not all of them, the young ones, were the ones who did, especially William and Teresa. Since Jasmine was so young and never left her father's side for long, she did not care. As for the older ones, they did not participate in this childish matter. Since they did not find any reason or benefit for doing something like that, especially Raymond and Axel, they decided to ignore it. The twins, Lionel and Oris, liked to watch this matter, though. They found it amusing, especially when it turned into a fight between Teresa and William too. Edward did not see any reason to stop these debates since he enjoyed them as well. He did not see any harm in letting the other continue such acts outside the court. He saw that this might be a breakthrough in the relationship between the two female knights. The rivalry between them might allow them to go further and further. This matter could encourage other females to become like those two and work much harder to achieve that. Plus, since the small folks would like to talk about this topic and make them enjoy their life more and more, Edward did not want to stop it. Even after his first two sons and Stannis came to him and asked him to take action personally, since the people in the kingdom respected Edward and would listen to his words, Edward did not care and let the topic continue. He saw it as a chance to increase the morale of his people. The small folks particularly liked to entertain themselves with those topics. Dream on. Lady Brienne is the best. Even Brother Axel found it difficult to defeat Lady Brienne, and you know how powerful Brother Axel is. HMPH. Said William as he wanted to tease his sister. Actually, he only entered this fight to tease her since it was one of the only topics that could annoy her. He did not care about who was better among the two of them, since the two were amazing and could defeat anyone in his eyes. But when he heard the debates going on for some time, he knew where his sister's loyalty was. He knew that she would support Lady Corinna since she was her personal knight, who took care of her since she was young against Lady Brienne, so he chose Lady Brienne's side. "You wanna die?" said the little girl who did not like anyone who underestimated her friend and the captain of her princess guard. She was ready to fight William and teach him another lesson, but another brat stepped in to prevent the fight too. "Haha, you two don't look like Uncle Edward at all. I heard from my father that Uncle Edward was always calm since he was your age. He only spoke when he wanted to anger someone. But your mouths can't stop insulting each other for a second," said Arya with a laugh. She had heard everything about Edward from her father. She heard that he was a brave man that did not like to make unnecessary moves. Of course, Ned would hide his friend's shameful acts back then. He could not tell his children that Edward was arrogant and rude at his early age, that he infuriated Tywin at the young age of 15. When the two brats heard her words, they stopped their fight to look at her. They both then smiled at each other before turning their eyes toward Arya, before giving her a sinister smile. "Ari, it seems that you did not learn from last time. You need your older sister to teach you again," said Teresa as she stood behind Arya and started tickling her, making the poor child fall on the ground from laughing. Okay. Stop that," said Arya as she could not help her tears from falling down from laughter. She was sensitive and would laugh easily at this point. "Where is Lady Corinna? Did not she follow you?" said William as he found it strange not to find Corinna around his sister. Karenna would always follow Theresa like her shadow in order to protect her. He wanted to use this chance to witness a fight between Brienne and Karenna. She should be at any moment. I sent her to check the training ground in Winterfell to prepare my bow. I don't want to ignore my training like someone," said Theresa with a smile. This topic was her favorite since it was where she excelled. Unlike William, who only did the required training that his father asked him to do, Theresa, as a girl, did not like to lose and would train whenever she found a little time to spare to train more. That was why she would always bully William, who could not defeat her at all. His older brothers would always tease him as well while complimenting Theresa. That was the reason why she took pride in her training and would always practice. William, who heard Theresa's words, got angry at once, and his face turned red. He knew that his father would propose a marriage between him and Arya this time, and did not want to lose face in front of his friend and future wife like this. He did not fight his sister in the past year, and it seemed that it was time to test his training to gain some of his lost faces. "Fine, let's go to the training ground right now if you dare," said William as he looked at Theresa's annoying expression with anger in his voice. Theresa would always use this topic when she wanted to beat him up. This time, he would win and beat her up. "Your Highnesses, please, take care of your image," said the silent and amused Brienne standing next to them. She was supposed to follow the rest of the King's Guard, but since William asked her to follow him with his own Prince Sigurd, she had to listen to him. Arya, who seemed to remember that Brienne was next to her after she got absorbed in Theresa and William's fight, turned to Brienne at once. Chapter 154, Arya's Request. "Does your sword has a name?" asked Arya as she ignored the twins and focused her attention on the knight in front of her. Although Theresa was a powerful fighter, Arya did not know that yet since the two did not see each other for 4 years. During their first meeting, Theresa did not start training herself at that point. Edward did not ask her to train at that time because she was still young. Arya only saw Brienne as the one who she should follow right at the moment, not Theresa. Brienne's sword also got Arya's attention as it was beautiful. "Yes, it is a sword given to me by the king, a Valyrian steel sword. I named it Life Oath, after the king gave it to me. It represented the king's trust in me. That is why it is dear to me, and I will only hold it to protect my king and his family," said Brienne with a smile after she took her sword out. She still remembered the day where the king called her to appoint her as one of his King's Guard. At that time, although many doubted that she would manage to achieve that since Karenna failed for years, she managed to do that with her own efforts. When she knelt in front of the king to accept her appointment, Edward took this sword and asked her to keep it since she was the one who deserved it the most. Brienne would never forget that scene, and Edward's words would not disappear from her ears. When she would feel down at some time, she would remember his words, and her courage would overcome her disappointment and fears. Don't think, since Brienne was a respectful King's Guard at the moment that the talks about her had disappeared. On the contrary, those noble ladies' words reached her, and she would feel some disappointment here and there. But when she remembered the king's trust, Brienne would throw those thoughts to the back of her mind. "Rise, Brienne of House Tarth. Rise and let everyone know that you are better than them. Rise and let everyone witness how great you are." Those were Edward's exact words that encouraged Brienne all that time. That was why she was grateful to her king, who did not care about anyone's opinion about her and accepted her the way she was. For the brave and courageous, Lady Brienne of Tarth, I, Edward of House Baratheon, the first of his name and the Storm King, give this Valyrian steel sword for her and her descendants after her. Name it for everyone to know your companion, Dame Brienne." The female knight continued to remember Edward's words that motivated her all that time. She started to see the difference between Edward and the other lords and kings before him. He was not only wise, but he knew how to accept anyone that served him. As for those swords, they were Edward's loot. You would not believe what Edward had found in the warehouses owned by noble houses and mercenaries in the free cities. Not to mention the wealth owned by those families, the rewards like the Valyrian steel weapons and armors would be enough to throw the realm into disorder. A total of 43 pieces got found in those warehouses. Among them were 3 swords that should have disappeared from Westeros like Truth, Vigilance, and Dark Fucking Sister. Even the crown that Aegon in the First War, which was made from Valyrian steel, got found there. Edward did not believe his eyes after seeing those items. It seemed those noble families were scheming against Westeros for a very long time. They had 2 ancestor items that belonged to the Targaryen. Edward did not know what he would find if he took Pentos and Brovos as well. Would he find the sword Blackfire, In one of the warehouses belonging to the Iron Bank? Who taught you how to fight? Asked the girl with stars in her eyes. She did not expect that her uncle, Edward, was amazing like that. Although she heard a lot about him, she still could not believe that her father's close friend was too different from her father. Her father always sided with her mother and would not allow her to practice with his sword. Although she was better than her brother, Bran, when it came to using the bow, they would not allow her to practice with his sword. My father taught me for 6 years. After that, I started training under King Edward as his squire, said Brienne as she remembered that nice time when she was still training as a squire and getting trained under the king's instructions himself. Time sure flew quickly. The king did not have time to instruct her personally anymore. You are so lucky. My father would not allow me to hold a sword, said the young girl with a sad voice. She did not understand why her father would not allow her to learn how to use the sword as her brothers did. Don't worry, Ari. If you come to Storm's Eye with us, you will get the chance to learn how to use the sword. Father always insisted that every one of his children must know how to fight or he would kill us himself. Your elder sister here is a super tough one, said the little devil, Teresa, as she looked at William with some mockery. She did not understand why her father wanted Arya to marry her idiotic brother. She should be the one that married Arya 9 what? Teresa, you learned how to use the sword? Asked the little girl, a little surprised as she did not expect that her childhood friend to have learned how to fight before she did. Of course, I did. Not only the sword, but I have learned how to use the bow and dagger as well. I could kick William's ass in no time, said Teresa in a cheerful tone. She got happier when she saw her brother's red face. Arya, who heard those words, made her decision and turned to Brienne to ask her for a favor. It was better than her mother had left with the others, leaving her here with the Baratheon's children. It was her chance to ask Brienne to teach her something. Can you teach me how to use the sword? Arya asked the female knight standing in front of her while hanging a sword on her waist. She was a bit rude here as she did not address her as a lady or dame, but, well, this was Arya when she had ever respected anyone. Arya had to ask her father to send her with Uncle Edward to Storm's Eye. There, she would have a chance to learn further. Chapter 155, A Duel. I don't think it's appropriate right now, my lady, said the knight as she knew that the Starks would not like this idea. She could not teach the little girl here in Winterfell, at least. If the young girl wanted to learn, she should follow them to Storm's Eye. After hearing Brienne's words, the little girl got disappointed. She was sure that her place was not in Winterfell anymore and she should find a way to leave it. Don't be like that, Lady Brienne. Let's go to the training field. Teresa had to practice anyway. You should teach Arya a move or two, said William with a smile. He knew if he screwed things up here, his father would kill him this time. Plus, he wanted to have a fight with her sister to prove that he was better than her this time. After hearing William's words, the group had different expressions. Teresa understood what William wanted to do and smiled. She knew that William could not defeat her, and she would humiliate him in front of his future wife. She would be happy to do something like that since it was William's request. No one told him to show off in front of the other. As for Arya, she felt secretly overjoyed since Brienne would not refuse William's words. Plus, she got to witness her friend's skills. She did not believe Teresa when Teresa told her that she could hold a sword and fight since Arya could not raise the sword herself because her body was a little small, even compared to other girls. The sword was too heavy for her to carry. Well, most of the northern ones were like that. They were long and a little heavy to suit the northerns' bodies. But Teresa had a physique that was like the Baratheons. Although she was not that huge like the boys, she was strong and tall. As for Brienne, she felt troubled since she did not want to do anything that would cause Edward to lose his face. Winterfell was in the north and not on the Kingdom of Storms, so she did not want to teach Arya without the king's approval. But she could not refuse the prince's request and had to follow them. Near the training ground, the group of the Stark children was walking with Edward's children. Raymond was leading the group while talking with Lady Stark while Axel was getting assaulted by Robb. Robb and Axel were friends, or that was how Robb thought. Axel was indifferent like always. He did not care about anything in the world except his family. He behaved like that since he came to this world. He would ignore anyone around him if they were not a member of his family. That was why he found it difficult to befriend anyone. Edward had tried to change the little one's personality since he was young. He did not want another Stannis in his children. Edward managed to change his character a little, But everyone still found it hard to communicate with Axel, who was like an emotionless stone. Although he made some friends in Storm's Eye, he did not spread his friends' network beyond that. Axel only befriended the sons of Edward's friends like Edmund Cullen, Davos Flip, and Arthur Pineapple. He did not care about others as he did not find any interest in befriending more. Although he was like that, he cared about everyone, really. He would always stand for everyone from the kingdom against any outsider. He would also give some face to Edward's friends and their families. That was the reason that he acted like that in front of Robb. Although he did not like Robb's company since he was not interested in the northern lifestyle, Axel would still accompany Robb whenever he came to the north. 3 Axel was much different from Raymond in this regard, but he was Raymond's biggest supporter. Raymond was more like Edward. He knew how to fake his emotions very well and use his head to scheme against others if he did not like them, although Edward would stop him before Raymond killed some of his friends. One mad person was enough as Edward could not afford 2 Edwards at the same time. Although it was like that, Raymond was still Edward's favorite son, although he did not admit it in front of the others since he did not want to hurt their feelings. Edward treated them all the same, but he would give Raymond some favorites here and there. Robb, who stood beside Axel, came close to him and started annoying him again. It had been 4 years since they saw each other. "I have heard what you did in Essos. You did great things again, Axel," said Robb as he smiled at Axel. He wanted to have a fight with Axel to see where he stood right at the moment. He knew that Axel was stronger than him, but he did not want to give up this easily. He saw Axel as his rival, and Axel had done many things to gain a name for himself and become well known in the known world in the past few years while he was here in Winterfell training with Jon and the rest of his brothers without any excitement in his life. "Is that so?" said Axel with an indifferent expression that might annoy anyone in front of him. He did not care if he offended anyone by doing something like that, though. If you did not want to see that expression, then don't come to speak with me. That was Axel's motto. Robb, who got used to Axel's behavior and expression, did not mind that much. In fact, Axel's behavior was the thing that made him decide to become his friend. Axel did not like to talk much with his mouth, but he preferred to use his actions to prove himself. That was why the warriors and real knights would prefer to get close to Axel and fight each other rather than talk like women did. "What do you think about a duel? We did not see each other for 4 years. I want to have a fight with you like the old days," said Robb as he looked at Axel with a smile. Although he continued to lose to Axel back then, he had been training since then and would not admit defeat just like that. "Are you sure?" asked Axel as he looked at Robb with an indifferent expression. He did not like to fight an unnecessary fight. Although he loved nothing more than to train as if there was no tomorrow and would follow his father in his meetings to learn a little from him, he wanted to live his peaceful life. He would not fight unless he had to do that. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156, Edward's Children. "Yes, I am sure. Let's go to the training ground," said Robb while a smile did not leave his face. That was the chance that he was waiting for in the past 4 years. If Robb could defeat Axel at this place, would not his name spread all over Westeros? He, who defeated the ferocious deer, would be well known all over Westeros and the eastern parts of Essos. Lionel and Orys, who stood behind the two with Sansa and Bran walking by their sides, could help but smile after hearing the two's words. They could not help but smirk when they saw Robb's expression. They had seen many with that same expression, who came to fight Axel for glory. They even remembered when Axel's brother-by-law, Loras Tyrell, came to fight Axel to gain some fame. Axel was having a bad day at that time. The twins remembered how he kicked down Loras with one blow making him faint at once. They also remembered what he said to Loras at that time that made Loras tremble with fear. "If you come to me with your pathetic self again, I would not mind killing the last male heir to Highgarden. Even if you are my brother-by-law, I would not care much." That was Axel's exact words to Loras. This speech was also the longest time the twins had seen their brother talk. They even started to count the words one by one, but a scram, shout from their brother made them flee. I will go with the show version of House Tyrell. The Tyrell would have only 2 children in this generation, with Loras as the only male heir. Lionel and Orys themselves were strong enough to beat Robb. The reason why the two 14-year-old boys were not well known like their brother Axel was because of their brother's fame. As every warrior in Stormsland said, Axel was the only one who had a chance to defeat Edward in his 20s. That was why Axel's fame in this area hid his other brother's accomplishments. Even their elder brother, Raymond, had told them before that sooner or later, Axel would defeat him, as he could only defeat Axel depending on his stamina. Axel had the technique and the body suitable for fighting and would win with ease against Raymond in the future. Although Raymond was a strong young man, who could face and defeat Jaime Lannister in his prime, he admitted that he could not win against his younger brother, Axel. As for the administrative work, the twins could not compare to their brother Raymond, who took after their father in this regard. Edward had divided his kingdom into 4 parts: north, east, south, and west. He wanted to train his sons, so he let every one of the 4 be a warden. His son, Raymond, ruled the east from Storm's End. Axel ruled the west from a new castle located to the southeast of Golden Grove, called Eastern Hall. That was why he was the most suitable to marry the Tyrell girl. After Edward stopped House Tyrell's raids on the eastern part, he announced that his son Axel would be the warden of the west. He was responsible for retaliating against any attacks coming from the Reach and Westerlands. One Lionel got appointed as the warden of the south. He would rule from Summerhall and defend against Dorne. Orys Baratheon would be the warden of the north, and he stationed from Northern Hall, a castle which was a few miles away from King's Landing at the intersection between the King's Road and Rossa Road. Raymond, who heard the conversation behind him while walking in the front with Lady Stark, did not say anything, since he saw this as a way to get to know the North's performance and show off the strength of his brother. He also thought of this as a reliable way to make his brother open up a little to the others, since he tried to change his brother's expression with his father all this time, but it did not work. So, he decided to follow the group to the training ground. "Easy there, you two. We will all go, and I will be the judge in your duel," said Raymond when he saw the two separating themselves from the group to go to the training yard by themselves. He had to be there to stop his brother in time before he could hurt a Stark boy. His brother did not show mercy to anyone when he fought. That was why he decided to act as a judge during their fight. After listening to Raymond's words, Lady Stark felt a little troubled by this. All her arrangements for the arrival of the Storm King would go to waste just like that. She wanted to stop the fight between the two young men and move on with what she had arranged, but Raymond stopped her before she could say anything. "Don't worry, Lady Stark. Everything will go as you have prepared. They will have a quick duel and will stay still for the whole day after that, right?" said Raymond after seeing the hesitation on Lady Stark's face. He smiled to reassure her before looking at the two boys, who were ready to fight, warning them in the process. Robb nodded his head after seeing his mother's troubled expression and the threatening look on Raymond's face. Robb was not afraid of anyone in the young generation except Raymond. He was the devil in his eyes, especially after what Raymond did to him when they were children. We will get to that later. I will explain it as a kind of memory when the time comes. Meanwhile, as the group went on their way to find the training yard, Edward, Ned, and Jon entered the crypt. As they walked further forward, Edward looked left and right, and he could see the previous kings and lords from the Stark. Edward really liked this scene as it described a history of thousands of years. This place was like an encyclopedia for the Starks. No wonder they cherished it this much, and every Stark that died would have a statue here. Well, anyway, it did not take long before Edward, and the group following him, saw the statues of Rickard Stark, Brandon Stark, and Lyanna. Edward knew that he was responsible for the three's death and could not help but shake his head after seeing their statues. He was the one who ordered Brandon's death after Rickard got burned alive by the Mad King. Chapter 157, Aegon fucking Targaryen. The man must have been cursing him in his grave all the time, since Brandon thought that Edward was his friend and liked Edward a lot as he was his brother, but he got killed in the end by the same person he thought of as a friend and a brother. Edward could have saved Rickard if he told him not to go to King's Landing to meet the king, but he did not. Edward wanted Rickard's death, and that was the result. Although Rickard might not be cursing Edward directly right at the moment, he must have been dissatisfied and angry at Edward, who caused the death of two of his children. As for the cheerful and beautiful Lyanna, Edward did not dare to think of anything concerning her, since the main reason for her death after Rhaegar was him. Edward found many different ways that he could use to instigate the rebellion without Lyanna getting involved, but he did not want to think about them back then. Since Edward thought that Lyanna was a must-die target because she was an uncontrollable variable, Lyanna had to die then. Even at this moment, although he matured a lot after all those years, he still found his decision back then was the most suitable. Lyanna was an unruly woman, and Edward would not have the ability to control her without imprisoning her and restraining her freedom. So it was better that she left the world entirely while she had some good feelings about him, rather than getting killed by his hand in the end. That was Edward's thinking, and nothing could change this mentality, even the time itself. A long time has passed since I saw you, little Lyanna. I hope you are alright and not lonely there, said Edward with a voice loud enough for the two following him to hear. Edward missed her a little bit, but he would not say those words unless he wanted to deceive the big and small idiots behind him. One was her brother, who loved her more than he did his wife, while the other was her son, who did not know anything about her. It has been more than 4 years, right, Ned? Said Edward as he was still looking at Lyanna's statue while talking to Ned, who looked at her as well. Ned was still missing his sister and would always blame himself and Rhaegar for her death. His sister did not deserve to die like that. Yet, it has been some time, said Ned as he answered Edward while remembering the last moments in Lyanna's life before his eyes shifted to Jon, who stood there and looked at Lyanna's statue without saying anything. The little Jon did not know why those two asked him to follow him. Jon, who had some features of Ned's dear sister, would make Ned's eyes turn red every time he looked at him. The three stood there in silence for some time without saying anything until Edward got bored by this situation. There was nothing there unless you could talk to the dead, so Edward turned his face to Jon. He was ready to ask Jon to follow him this time around to Storm's Eye. Are you doing alright in Winterfell since the last time I saw you, little Jon? Asked Edward with a smile on his face. It was the smile that Edward had trained to do long ago when he wanted to trick someone. It made him a little approachable. This smile was what he tried to teach his sons in the past 15 years, but only Raymond was the one who managed to do it. Axel was a gloomy young man who did not like to talk to others, especially with all those lords and nobles who tried to flatter him. Axel was not on Stannis's level of gloominess like Stannis was in the show where he did not know how to smile at all, though. Axel knew how to smile, especially when he was with his family but only with his family. As for the other brats, Lionel and Orys were alright, and they were learning. Teresa had some hope to be the only girl to take after her father's features in this regard. William was hopeless, and Edward had given up on him long ago. Jasmine would not be suitable for something like that after what happened in her childhood. We will talk about this later. It is alright, Uncle Edward. I like being here with my brothers and sisters, said Jon as a downhearted smile appeared on his face. He could not say he did not like how he lived here in Winterfell and make his father lose face in front of someone as powerful as the Storm King. That was why Jon smiled even after all the abuse that Catelyn gave him. He did not mention her in his speech, though, and Edward and Ned knew why that was the case. I heard that you wanted to go to the wall, right? Asked Edward with a knowing smile. It was as if he was telling Jon that his petty tricks would not work here. He did not want Jon to lie in front of his face, since he would be the one who took care of Jon from this point. Edward wanted Jon to be the honorable one from the show. He thought that the not even honorable Jon was easier to control and use. That was why Edward let Ned raise him all those years. Edward was afraid that if he was the one who is responsible for Jon all those years, little Jon might get twisted and compete with him or his children for the throne. Edward already had had enough with the Targaryen brat in Braavos. He did not know how that brat lived all that time with such a mentality. Edward had sent Robb Stone personally to take care of that brat 5 years ago. But until this moment, no satisfying result came up. The brat was arrogant and had a shit personality since Varys had sent him to those hypocrites in Braavos and Pentos that filled his head with the nonsense of the Iron Throne being his birthright and other shit that corrupted the young man mentality. At least, he had Jon Connington with him in the actual timeline. That alone helped him to correct this shit personality a little. But this time, with the help of Varys and his group, who were not reliable enough to guide the young Targaryen, Aegon was the same shit personality as Viserys at the start of the canon. He was an arrogant brat that thought that everything must be given to him because he was the rightful king. Of course, this group of people did not allow Aegon's existence got out, nor they allowed him to meet Viserys and Daenerys 1. Chapter 158, Taking Jon to Storm's Eye. Edward's estimation was a mistake in this one. He thought that he could use Aegon to play some moves against the Lannister and Robert in King's Landing, but he was wrong. He could only use him for one movement on this chessboard at most, as he estimated that the young Aegon would die the moment he reached Westeros because of how idiot he turned to be. Edward could only find out all this after he sent Robb Stone. No one knew about Robb's existence since Edward made sure of that. With the help of some blood rituals, Robb was able to change his features so that his old friends would not recognize him. After Edward sent him to this mission, he hid himself well for 2 years and set up a new golden company to trick the masters of Braavos and Pentos. After Robb had put some hard work into those relationships to make them work and fighting Edward's men here and there to prove himself, Robb managed to become the close advisor of the magisters of those cities and the Iron Bank. Those magisters found that the only chance to defeat Edward and get out of the siege set around their cities that almost made them starve for years was by helping the Targaryen take their seats in Westeros. Those men did not know that Edward was the one that allowed them to act like that in the first place. If he wanted to sake their cities long ago, he would do so any time. Edward was only waiting for Daenerys to leave Pentos while Robb worked on Aegon's side to let him attack King's Landing with the remaining men of Braavos and Pentos. After that, Edward planned to fuck up Braavos and take the rest of their wealth. He would destroy their mighty titan and allow them to see the difference in status between their city and his kingdom. That marvelous titan, standing in front of Braavos to protect the city ages ago, would get crushed and sunk into the sea soon. He estimated that he would take Braavos in a year at most. After that, Pentos would be an easy deal since Edward did not consider Pentos as an enemy. They did not have enough soldiers nor fleets to defend the city. They only depended on Braavos and the Dothraki to keep them safe. By that time, Braavos would fall in Edward's hands while the Dothraki would go extinct sooner or later. Back to the group who were in the crypt, Jon, who heard Edward's words, panicked a little as he did not tell anyone about his wishes except the Starks. He looked at his father as Ned was the only one Edward talked to since he came to Winterfell, but he saw that Ned was shaking his head. Ned knew that Edward had an information network that was greater than the Spider, Varys, himself, so of course, Edward's knowing that was not a surprise to Ned. As for if Ned was afraid for his or his family's lives, Ned trusted Edward more than anyone at this point, so he was not afraid that something like that could happen. Yet, I plan to go to the Wall when I turn 15. I should go after 2 months from now, said the young man, a little embarrassed after Edward detected his lies. That was the problem with the honorable men. They did not know how to lie or could not lie, to be exact. They saw that their honor was in their words. And since their honor was more important to them than anything else, they would never break their promises. That was especially the case for the Starks. The Northerners would also go by that rule unless their benefits were against it. But since it was in Edward's interests this time, he did not mind this point. Although he hated their mentality, in general. Well, you can delay your plans as you will follow me back to Storm's Eye this time. You won't have to serve on the Wall, said Edward with a smile on his face. He looked like a devil right at that moment. He ordered the people around the way he liked. I don't think that is suitable, Edward. Jon, said Ned as he tried to find excuses to keep Jon in the north. He did not want Jon to go south where Robert could know Jon's real identity. Plus, he did not want Jon to have any claim to the throne. Although Ned liked Jon because of his sister, he still hated the Targaryen part and did not want it to surface to the world. Edward did not let Ned complete his words. Ned had already done a very excellent job raising Jon to this point, and it was enough in his eyes. Jon would follow him to Storm's Eye, and this was Edward's final decision. Enough with that, Ned. I also made my promise. You already did well until now, but it is enough already. I can't break my promise as well, said Edward as he looked at Ned with cold eyes. He had argued with Ned the last time he came to the north. He had told him that his ways made Edward break his promise. If Ned could not control his wife, then he should let Jon follow him. Jon, who got stuck between the two large men shouting at each other, didn't know what they were talking about in the first place. He did not understand much but had a hunch that Edward knew his mother after hearing the word promise. Although Jon was not a good thinker, he was better than Ned, at least. Edward experienced more than Ned experienced in his childhood. Although Ned went through a lot because he was the second son, comparing him to Jon, who is a bastard, what Ned went through was child play. Ned wanted to argue with Edward more, but Edward caught him to it. He would not allow Ned to say anything more, even if he had to use his authority. Ned, I don't have the time for all this. A storm is coming to the realm soon. I had already sensed it the same way I did back then before the Targaryen fell. I don't know what would happen this time exactly, But I had already warned Jon Arryn a month ago. But I estimate that the storm will come to the north in a month or two. So, it is better for little Jon to follow me," said Edward with a pressing voice, faking it, of course, with an air of the king, this time putting an end to this conversation. Chapter 159, Fight in the Courtyard. Ned, who heard his words, had a change in expression since he knew how sensitive Edward was to such things. Ned was there during the meeting between Lord Arryn, his brother, Brandon, and Edward in Harrenhal, and knew how Edward predicted things back then. Edward was the sole reason for the Targaryens' 3 centuries rule over Westeros to end. So Ned had to take his words seriously, even if they were unbelievable. No one would believe that the 9 years of peace that the realm had seen would end this way. Although there were minor conflicts here and there, especially between Edward and Robert with his Lannister friends, the things did not evolve to the degree where it would endanger a dynasty. Jon, who did not say a word since the two men started arguing, did not know whether to laugh or cry. The king did not give him a chance to say anything and would take him to Storm's Eye just like that. Jon liked Edward and knew that he cared about him, but he should not behave like that, right? Edward should give Jon a choice to choose where he wanted to go. But before he could open his mouth to disagree, Jon saw Edward smile and could not help but swallow his words. No way was he doing to annoy this monster in front of him. "Since we finished what we came here for, let's go outside. I will have to go to the wall to send the men that I brought. Since I wanted to have a talk with the Lord Commander, Mormont, I will have to take them personally. You are coming with me, Jon. You wanted to see the wall, and here is your chance," said Edward with a smile as he stretched a little after getting what he wanted. Ned and Jon, who was looking helplessly at the moment at the other two men, who decided his fate just like that without letting him have any choice in his life, nodded their heads after hearing Edward's words and followed him to the outside without saying anything. The group soon left the crypt and moved towards the guest house where Edward would stay for the night. Ned had prepared a feast for Edward and his family in the Great Hall after taking some rest. As they walked outside, they got attracted by the commotion that happened not far away from the courtyard where the young ones should be training. They could see the servants move quickly here and there. The children were the most excited and had some weird expressions on their faces as they ran towards the training yard as fast as they could. The group was interested in what was happening there after seeing all this and hearing all this noise. They decided to ask someone to know the truth about what was happening over there. Lucky for them, they did not stand there much and could see Vayenpool hurrying with servants and moved towards the training yard as well. Ned did not wait and asked Vayenpool at once. He liked the discipline he created in Winterfell over time and loved the peaceful life there and did not like when everyone ran around like that. But whenever Edward and his family came to Winterfell, all those things would happen. "Pool, what is happening over there?" asked Ned as he looked at Pool with his grim as always look. Edward wondered if Ned was born like that or Lyanna's death had caused all that shit. It might be Catelyn, who was not skilled in bed and did not know how to please Ned Stark too. Edward had a wild imagination there. "I could tell you that, my lord," said the steward who had just seen his lord and Storm King coming from the crypt as he nodded his head. He did not expect to see them right there and at this moment. "Your son, Robb, wanted to have a fight with Prince Axel. Prince Raymond had agreed to let them fight and decided to be the judge. The other princes and Lady Stark followed them to witness what is going to happen. As for me, I have to supervise the things happening over there since the situation is as you can see," said Vayenpool as he was also feeling troubled by those children and all the problems they would cause. He wondered why they could not stay still in one place without causing trouble here and there. He was the one who prepared the feast for the Storm King and his sons with Lady Stark, but everything would go in ruin because of those brats. Haha, those brats. "Well, we can enjoy seeing them fight, at least," said Edward as he laughed out loud after hearing what Vayenpool had said. He knew that his sons would do something to annoy the Starks like always, but did not expect it to come from Axel since he was the one with a grim character and did not want to communicate with the others much. "How troublesome," said Ned with a grim smile after hearing Edward's words and seeing him laughing like that. Every time Edward and his sons came to the north, something like that would happen. Troubles would always follow Edward wherever he went. That was why Ned wanted Edward to leave Winterfell as soon as possible so that the castle could return to its peaceful age. "Stop acting like that, Ned. You should have gotten used to it by now," said Edward as he teased Ned Stark after hearing his words and seeing his expression. He knew he was the one who caused Ned his biggest headache as of right now, but he did not care. He did not want Ned to get used to the peaceful life in Winterfell, since he knew that if Ned did not use this little mind of his, he would die soon as well. Huh? Let's go, said Ned without looking at Edward, who would annoy him, as he moved forward to lead the group towards the training yard. The unlucky boy named Jon Snow, who followed the two men all this time and continued to do so even right now, did not get to say a word again and just followed them to the courtyard like a small sheep. Chapter 160, Jasmine Baratheon. Whatever, as if I can say no to those two in the first place. Both of them will eat me alive if I ever say something like that to any of them. Just look at Uncle Edward's face when I was just about to refuse his offer. If there is a devil in this world, it would be Uncle Edward without a doubt. At least, this time, I wanted to see the fight and see how Robb has improved in the past year, thought Jon, as he shook his head left and right since the two men did not give him any choice and made him follow whatever they decided themselves. It did not take long before the group reached the training yard and saw what was happening there. Edward could see his son, Axel, taking his sword and swinging it left and right, getting himself ready to fight. On the other hand, Robb, who would fight with Axel, was having a talk with his younger brother, Bran, and bragging. As for Raymond, it was as if he knew that his father would come at this moment and was looking in Edward's direction with a smile. When everyone saw who came, they all stood up and bowed a little in respect before going to their places again. Van Poel did not forget his job and at once and prepared 2 chairs for the Lord and the King to have a seat. I did not expect you to allow all this, Cat, said Ned as he looked at Catelyn with some disappointment. He wondered where the decisive Catelyn that would do anything that she decided upon at once. He saw her abuse Jon one time after another in the past because he was Ned's bastard without listening to his words. What can I do, my love? Your son refused to listen to me, and I had to listen to the 2 princes, said Catelyn as she shook her head after hearing Ned's words. She could not even persuade her son to stop from what he intended to do, then how would she have the ability to say no to the 2 princes? During all their talk, Catelyn's eyes did not leave Jon Snow. She could not hide the hatred in her eyes from Edward. She must be wondering what happened in the crypt between the 3 men and what Edward told Jon Snow there. She would not trust anything or anyone when it came to Ned's bastard and would not allow him to stay in Winterfell since he was Ned's elder son and could be a threat to her son's position. Although that was very hard to happen, Edward was the best example of this. Although he was not the first son, his father chose him as his heir instead of Robert. As for Edward, he looked around as if he was looking for someone, but it seemed that Edward could not find what he was looking for and signaled to his king's guard, Brienne of Tarth, who stood not far away from him with the 3 brats to come forward. Brienne, who saw her king's signal, came forward at once. When she stood in front of him, she bowed her head and waited for his order. Brienne, why did not you bring Jasmine with you? Asked Edward as he looked at the knight. Jasmine was the one that made Edward worry a lot. The young girl was so fragile and could not stay away from him for a long time. Don't worry, Your Grace. I have already sent a servant to call Yrza and the princess once I knew that we might be late in this place, said the female knight with a strong voice after hearing Edward's question. Edward trusted Brienne a lot, especially after he had lost one of his 8 commanders while another one could not fight anymore as he lost an arm and got poisoned when he tried to hunt for the ingredients required for the blood rituals. We will come to this event later, so Edward had to find new people that he could rely on, and the female knight was one of them. Since he knew Brienne's true personality, it was an easy decision to make. Before Edward could say anything more, a septa came to the training yard with a small girl walking beside her while holding her hands. When the little girl saw her father sitting right there, she did not wait for the septa and at once let go of the septa's hand and ran towards her father as fast as she could. The girl would be afraid as long as she was a little far away from her father and would scream at night if she did not sleep beside him. Edward did not know how to do more than what he already did to improve his little Jasmine's condition. Although there was a little improvement in this situation, the girl was still in this state after 5 years of that accident. Edward could only blame Ashera for this and could not help but get angry at himself whenever he remembered that accident, as he was one of the reasons that something like that happened in the first place too. Father, said the young girl as she dove into her father's lap, ignoring everyone present since she knew that her father could take care of all this for her. That was always how the little princess behaved in Storm's Eye. Even in the Storm throne room, she would enter and act like that in front of the other lords who would attend the court. 5. You are here, little Jasmine. I was just about to ask Lady Brienne to go and get you, said Edward with a smile after he saw the little girl's antics. Jasmine was his favorite since she was his youngest daughter and the one who stayed the most with him. He doted on her the most because he felt a little guilt in his heart when it came to this little girl. The little girl did not reply and just waited there like that, and Edward did not interrupt her as he knew how sensitive the girl was. He let her do whatever she wanted. When the fight was about to start, Edward patted her a little to get her attention. He knew that although the little girl was shy and afraid of nearly everything, she always liked to see duels and fights like this one, especially when her brothers or sister were the ones who would fight. Chapter 161, The Start of the Fight. Little one, look. Your brother's duel will start soon. If you want to see your brother fight, it is the right time to look up, said Edward with a soft voice as he smiled at the little girl. Edward would act like that only in front of Jasmine. Although he loved all his children and did not mind if he doted on them here and there, he would be strict with them most of the time, especially when it came to their training. Only Jasmine did not have to do anything, and Edward would still dot on her. Everyone got a little surprised and shocked by the scene. Everyone had heard a lot about how Edward was cruel in the past. They heard how he killed thousands of people without caring about anything in the world. They even heard about how Edward was even strict with his children, the boys and girls, especially when he trained them. But looking at this scene at the moment made them doubt what they heard. How could such a loving father who doted on his daughter like that be the cruel one everyone talked about previously? Ned Stark could not help but smile after seeing all this as well. He knew that his friend had suffered a lot in the past few years and only smiled when he was with his youngest daughter, so he wanted to see his friend behave like that more. The little girl who heard her father's words raised her head, who had literally buried her head in her father's lap like an ostrich. Nothing was more exciting than watching her brothers fight while she sat there in her father's lap. She would always enjoy something like that. Although she was not the one who talked much, every one of her brothers and sister knew that she liked it when they fought with other people and won the fight. They would always like to see her smile, as the young one was like a fairy when she smiled. And since this was one of the ways to make their little sister laugh, and they could see her smile, they would organize a tourney in Storm's Eye every now and then. Although the tourneys were not on that large scale, since the group was organizing one every year or two, the tourney still attracted many people and became a landmark in Storm's Eye. Edward did not tell his sons and his other daughter about what happened to their sister back then. Even Raymond, who Edward trusted much and would be Edward's heir if nothing wrong happened, did not know what happened back then. Edward only told his children that an assassin had kidnapped their sister and did something horrible to her. That was why she turned to be like that and would never talk to the others. Jasmine was not like her brothers and sister, who loved to fight or travel around and make trouble for Edward here and there. She was an adventurous soul like them, but she liked to see them fight and sit beside her father like that one. Although Edward did not tell Raymond about anything regarding the situation that happened at that time and thought that Raymond would not know since Raymond was training in SS at that time and was only 13 by then, he had underestimated Raymond's intelligence and his resources. Raymond would be much more intelligent than Edward himself when he matured and had his own children. Till this moment, Edward did know that Raymond had investigated what happened to his beloved sister. After some investigation from his side, Raymond was able to connect some dots and form a general picture of what happened at that time. He had already had his suspicions, especially after some events happened one after another in that period of time. After knowing what happened, he could not help but despise his mother for her foolishness and thought that what his father did was for the best. Although he was aware of what his mother did back then and did not try to change her behavior, he thought it was not a big deal since what she did at that time would not affect them much. That did not mean that he did not despise her, though. Raymond was not like his brothers or sisters. His brothers and sisters were young back then and did not understand their mother's behavior or what she was doing. But how could the young Raymond not know about what she was doing? He even saw her with his own eyes what she did when he was 10, so he did not get or try to get close to her much. Although Raymond could come up with all that, he did not manage to see the whole situation since Edward had done more than that. If he knew about what Edward was doing at that time, Edward did not know if he would change his mind about his father or support him. Although Raymond was an intelligent young man who schemed against the others like Edward and wished nothing more than have everything in his control, Raymond was still a family man. Edward made sure of that since he did not want his son to be a kinslayer like him. He did not want Raymond to kill his brothers and sisters when he grew up if Raymond saw them as a danger to himself. Until that moment, no one knew that Edward was the one who killed his brother Ringley. Even if his son was smart, He would not manage to deduce something like that without witnessing it. Anyway, back to the courtyard where Robb and Axel were about to start their fight. Edward could see that both sides were ready to start, and Raymond was about to say the word and allow them to engage. "You both ready?" asked Raymond as he looked to his left to see Axel, who nodded his head, saying that he was ready. After that, Raymond looked to his right to check on Robb. Although Robb was afraid of Raymond, it was not the time for all that and gave him his nod. Raymond nodded to both sides one last time before raising his hand and looking at Edward and Ned to get their permission. Edward wanted to see his daughter smile and wanted to see his son kick Ned's son's ass, so of course, he would give his signal to start. As for Ned, after seeing his friend smile, he knew that he could not say anything to stop this fight anymore and gave his approval as well. Plus, he wanted to see how his son, Robb, fared in front of Axel, who everyone sang songs about his bravery. Chapter 162, Injuring Robb Stark. "Go," said Raymond as he stepped back, giving the field to the two to perform while paying attention to the fight. Although the group liked to cause trouble here in Winterfell for Ned and his family, they did not want to harm anyone when they did so. They would lose their face if they allowed such a thing to happen. That was why Raymond would pay attention to their every move in order to interfere in the fight if he saw that someone might get injured. Robb, who had some confidence, thought that he could gain standing in this fight if he defended like this till he found a flaw in Axel's movement, raised his shield high while looking at Axel like a hawk. As for Axel, who fought hundreds of times in a life and death battle and put his life in danger many times, he knew what to do. When Axel saw that Robb used his shield like that trying to defend as much as he could, Axel decided to make a fake attack to create a flow so that he could get Robb out of his shell. At that time, he would manage to strike and end this fight in one move. Although Axel's favorite weapon was the spear, just like his father, Edward, he was better with a sword and shield, but he did not want to admit it. He wanted to defeat his father with a spear. The sword in his hands right now was none other than Dawn, Arthur Dayne's sword, who is well known in all Westeros. After defeating Arthur and capturing him after the fight in the Tower of Joy and falling out with House Dayne after they joined hands with Amardale and Rhaegar to fight him, Edward decided to take this sword as his reward. Even Ashera agreed with Edward's decision, since the one who had used the sword was her husband and her children. Plus, she thought Arthur did not deserve the sword anymore after he caused their sister's death. After Axel managed to become a knight, Edward gave him that sword to accompany him in his journey towards greatness. Axel, the youngest knight in history at the age of 15, exceeding Edward's record by 5 whole months, had that sword for 2 years since then. With a shield and black scale armor made from Valyrian steel that Edward found in the hands of the Magisters of Cahir, Axel was the invincible war god. Edward did not know how many swords those crazy forgers and nobles from Cahir did they reforge to make that fucking armor too anyway. Axel, who thought of this plan while looking at Robb, started implementing it directly without a second thought. He raised his shield in front of him after calculating the distance between him and Robb. Axel counted the number of steps separating the two before deciding to make a fake charge directly with his shield raised this high in Robb's direction. Robb, who did not experience real life and death fights before and did not kill anyone with his hand as Axel did, thought that he saw the flow that he would use to defeat Axel. He believed that this was his chance and made the decision to move to the side to dodge Axel's charge and attack with his shield and sword from Axel's back after he missed him, or that was what he thought. Axel, who held the shield in front of him and knew the number of steps that he needed to make and when he would have to stop his charge and redirect his attack, stopped his action in Robb's previous location and bashed the shield to the side to hit Robb directly, taking Robb by surprise. Robb, who was raising his sword at that time and did not think that Axel would pull this move, did not expect that and could not use his shield to defend in time and took the hit head on with his body and sword, making him step back with some blood coming out of his nose and mouth. There were some screams of horror and panic after seeing this scene since the crowd did not expect that their lord's son would bleed after the fight had just started. The one that her expression changed much was none other than Lady Stark. She did not expect her son would get injured this easily, and her heart started to feel pain after seeing him like that. The other Stark children stood up from their seats after seeing this scene as well, and the young ones looked concerned about their brother. Raymond, who saw this scene and knew that his brother was an idiot, was about to interfere to stop Axel, who did not know mercy when he fought anyone and would take any opponent seriously. Fight meant killing in Axel's dictionary. But before he could come close to stop this fight before anyone got more injured, Robb, who got hit by Axel's blow and was bleeding already, raised his hand to stop Raymond from coming any closer since he intended to continue with this fight. He was not planning to give up this easily and would not care about such a small injury. How could he allow this hit to affect his dream of gaining a name for himself if he managed to defeat Axel? He raised his shield again and looked at Axel like a hawk this time and came close to Axel, step by step. The two started exchanging blows for a minute or something after Rob got into Axel's range of attack before Axel decided to end this fight at that time and increased his attack output. Rob could not hold on any longer and could not keep up with Axel's attacks and got pushed back again and again. Axel used his sword, Dawn, and managed to shatter Rob's sword after a final shield bash that made him fall to the ground. At that time, Raymond did not wait any longer and used his Valyrian steel sword, Glory, to stop Axel's Dawn headed towards Rob to deal the final blow before pushing him back. He then looked at Rob, who was on the ground, to check how he was doing after receiving Axel's blow. "You okay down there, Rob?" said Raymond with a little loud voice as he looked at Rob, who got crushed on the ground. He was afraid that Axel's last blow might have caused some severe damage to Rob, who got injured at the start of the fight because of Axel's powerful hit with his shield. Raymond knew they could not just wound Lord Stark's heir like that in Winterfell. They would make him lose face by doing something like that, and that action was not acceptable for Ned or Edward himself. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163, Will.i.am and Teresa's Show. Rob, who was still in a daze after the last blow, and his ears were buzzing after he fell down, managed to hear Raymond's words somehow and knew that he had to say some words or he would frighten everyone looking at him right at the moment. His mother, his brothers, and his sisters would start to panic if they did not hear his words. "Yet, don't worry about me. I only need some help to stand up," said Rob as he waved his hands to show that there was nothing dangerous. He was doing that to tell Rickon and Bran, who shouted at him to check how he was doing, that he was fine and would stand up soon. "I will help you," said Raymond with a smile as he came close to Rob and held his hand to pull him up, just like that. He then helped Rob to where Edward, Ned, and the rest of the families were sitting. Van Poel did his job again, and before Raymond and Rob could reach the place, he had already prepared 2 chairs, one for the injured Rob while the other for Prince Axel. "Haha, look at your son, Ned. You were the same when you fought me back then." "Haha," said Edward with a loud laugh as he looked at Ned to tease him a little. Back when the two of them were wards serving Lord Arryn in the area, Ned would fight him to gain experience, and every time Ned would get injured like Rob did today. Edward's hands were not as heavy as Axel, though. He would stop after he put Ned down. Edward would use his head even during the fight, or he would kill everyone he fought. Before any friendly match with Axel, Raymond, any one of his brothers, or the knights from his Prince Sigurd must be there, or he would kill someone. Ned, who heard Edward's laughter and loud voice, wanted to punch him in the face after Edward said those words. He did not tell his children about what happened back then as he did not want to lose face, but Edward blew everything up by saying those words. One truly enough, after hearing Edward's words, every Stark child looked at Ned to see if this was all true. Even Rob, who had just sat down and was still bleeding, looked at Ned to check if it was the truth. Although they knew that Edward was the most mighty warrior at that time, they did not hear anything about him fighting their father and humiliating him like that. And according to Edward's words, it was not just one time but multiple times, and every time he would come out of the fight like Rob. Edward, who saw the change in the boys' and girls' eyes, knew that Ned did not tell them what happened back then and laughed out loud this time. He would not miss this chance to tease Ned and embarrass him a little in front of his children. "You did not tell them what happened back then, Ned. You are just a reckless one," said Edward with a knowing smile after seeing the change of Ned's expression. He decided to fool around a little more and spoke again. "Okay, gather around me, children. I will tell you how I kicked your father's ass back then. So, the story goes like this," said Edward with a smile after all the Stark's children's eyes were on him, but before he could complete his story, he got stopped by a shout from Ned. "Stop this shit, Edward," said Ned, whose expression was screaming of anger and his face turned a little red. Those moments were Ned's shameful ones, and he did want his children to hear about them. "You are such a fun killer," said Edward with an annoyed voice after hearing Ned's words. "Of course. He could ignore Ned's words and tell the stories from their past if he wanted to do something like that, but he decided to stop it at that and save what little face from Ned that remained intact. Well, let's go inside, said Edward as he stood up, ready to leave this field and have some sleep before attending the feast at night. But before he could move, the three brats came running towards him as if they needed something. "Father, wait," said the brat, Will.i.am, as he stood in front of Edward to stop him from leaving. They still had 2 fights here, and Edward must witness them. Will.i.am wanted to show Edward how much he had improved in the past year by defeating Teresa in a match and letting their father see it with his own eyes. By doing that, his father would be lenient in his training and would not torture him every time in the future when it came to this, and he could travel as much as he wanted. "What do you want?" asked Edward with an annoyed expression as he looked at Will.i.am. The young brat would be as death one day, and Edward would get angry every time this brat spoke to him. So Edward would prefer to stay away from this shameless brat. 3 Seeing their father's look change like that, the smart one, Teresa decided to take it from here as she knew that Will.i.am would fuck everything up if he spoke. Will.i.am did not have common sense when he spoke and would anger anyone in front of him. But she was the smart one in the twin, and she always managed to squeeze whatever she wanted from her father. "Father, Will.i.am challenged me to fight, and I have to teach him a lesson. You taught me that, and since I respect you so much, you have to see this fight." I wanted to show him that training with half effort is meaningless, said the little devil with a smile on her face that did not look like a smile at all in Edward's eyes when she looked at him. She was not only threatening Will.i.am here. She meant to send a threat in her words to her father as well to accept her offer and make him stay. Edward started to sweat a little after seeing this little devil smile like that and looked at Will.i.am as if he was looking at an idiot. How the hell did Edward raise this child? How the hell could that brainless brat anger this devil? If he wanted to die, why the hell was he dragging Edward with him? He should accept his death silently. Chapter 164, Asher's Madness. Edward thought that Teresa could be a little Cersei material and more if he developed her in that direction. Lucky for the whole realm and the world, Edward would not do something as reckless as this, as Teresa could turn into a real bitch that could fuck up with Cersei whenever she wanted if he did so. The problem was that she would not fuck up Cersei alone, but instead, she would fuck up Edward and the whole realm with her. "Fine, just finish with it quickly so I could have some sleep," said Edward with an awkward smile as he looked at her. It seemed that he was forced into obedience to her, and Ned Stark could not help but smirk a little after seeing this and wanted to tease Edward as he did to him earlier. Ned knew a little about every one of Edward's children's personalities after some conversation with Edward here and there. He knew that Edward feared Teresa the most. Edward would come to complain a little about her sometimes. He would ask Ned every time why she was not like her younger sister Jasmine, who was cute and obedient. Will.i.am, who heard Edward's words, got angry because Edward's words meant that he was nothing in front of his sister. Edward's words had one meaning in them. Teresa could defeat him whenever she wanted, and Will.i.am did not believe that. How could his father think of something like that? He was the male in the twins, so he should grow stronger than her as time passed. Edward, who sat back into his seat and saw his son's expression, wanted to give him a slap on the face to wake him up. The idiot did not know that he got led to all this and got trapped because he angered Teresa. She wanted to beat Will.i.am up, so she must have come up with an idea to let him propose this challenge so that she could enjoy hitting him. Edward thought that Will.i.am was done for this time, and there was no saving it for him. He did not care about Will.i.am's expression and turned to Raymond to give him an instruction. "Raymond, after your sister is finished with that idiot, please help him to get some aid, or he will die soon after that," said Edward with a serious expression on his face as he looked at Raymond. The problem was that Edward was not messing around here and was saying it as if Will.i.am's life would depend on Raymond's action. He knew that the devil who was his daughter would beat the idiotic Will.i.am till she was satisfied, and no one would manage to interfere in the fight unless they wanted a little devil to turn their life into a living hell. After hearing Edward's words, everyone started to laugh loudly, especially the Starks. They thought that Edward was playing around and joking in order to tease his younger son. But after looking at Raymond's serious face as well, they stopped their laughter and looked at the rest of Edward's children. Jasmine was sitting in Edward's lap with a knowing smile as she looked at Will.i.am with a little pity in her eyes. Axel's expression did not change much, though. Lyle and Oris had a smirk on their faces as they looked at Will.i.am with pity in their eyes as well. The fight between the two children did not take a long time to start. But after they fought for a few minutes, it ended, Just like that. It did not take much time from start to end, and the end result of their fight was like what Edward had predicted. Teresa did not go easy on the idiot named William and crushed him under her feet without giving him a chance to fight back, making him regret to propose such a fight again. The number of blows that William received in this fight was probably more than what he received in his entire life. Although this should have been a sword fight, Teresa had abandoned her sword at the start since she wanted to humiliate William. She then used her bare fists to punch William in the face again and again till she made him bleed from his nose, mouth, and ears. You could imagine how hard she kicked and punched him by imagining this scene. Teresa humiliated William in front of everyone. No one thought that William fought badly in this match, though. It was just that Teresa had him around her finger and knew when he would strike her and when he would retreat. Using her foresight in a battle, she hit him till his face was like a pig from her hits. Everyone present looked at William with pity in their eyes and wanted to console him, but they did not dare to come close as they were afraid to be like him if they interfered when Teresa was not done with him yet. This match shocked everyone present as they did not expect this result, and Arya, who stood there, had stars in her eyes as she looked at Teresa. Perhaps, Edward should have asked Ned Stark to marry Arya to his daughter, Teresa, instead of his useless son. This fight was an eye-opener for the people present since they did not expect a girl like Teresa to play with her opponent, William, like that. Teresa had become like that because she did not enjoy any mother's love in her childhood. Edward had to admit that his marriage to Ashra was a mistake since he did not expect all this shit to happen. Because of her behavior back then, Edward had to take care of his children by himself. And since Edward was strict in everything that came to his children, he could not give them what they needed. And after Cassana's death in year 288 AC, the younger ones did not have anyone to take care of them. Although Edward was the reason for everything Ashra had done after their marriage, he blamed her weak character for something like that. After the accident in King's Landing that resulted in her sister's death, Ashra started to change a little by little and would fall into madness shortly in the following few years. Although Edward knew about that, he did not do anything at first since he was the one who wanted her to change so that she could be of help to his children if he died without completing his goals. Ashra did not become like that mad bitch in a day or two. On the contrary, she took 10 whole years to become a monster who could hurt its kin and relatives. Everything started with a mountain and Amory that served as some dogs that Ashra kept in the dungeon. Chapter 165, The Mountain. Although she did something horrible like that action to the mountain and his fellow, the man did not even care about anything she did to him and did not even scream like his companion Amory, who shouted from the first time she did something like that. The fucking mountain proved that it was hard to break him down. If the mountain had screamed at that time like his bitch companion, Edward thought that Ashra might not have turned like that and would have returned to her usual self. Because she wanted to see the despair and agony on the faces of the people who did something like that to her sister and raped her dead body, Ashra did not give up and started reading books about the men's body structure to know their weakness in order to intensify the pain. She also read about the torture devices that she could use to get good results and ordered some from Tirash to see if the mountain would still not scream after torturing him. The days went on like that and the days turned years, but the mountain still refused to scream, but Ashra's mental health started deteriorating, instead. 5 years after the rebellion and nearly after Edward's second twins came to this world, Edward decided to end all this shit after seeing that Ashra's mental health started to affect his children since she began to neglect her duties and ignore their children. He saw that Ashra had no chance to get what she wanted from that the mountain. Edward had to use 4 of his commander to take him down, so how could Ashra make him do what she wanted just like that? Axel, who was supposed to grow up normally, was ignored by his mother repeatedly. That caused him to turn all his attention and frustration to training with his sword, especially after losing his grandmother, who took care of him since his birth. Edward started training all his children when they turned 8, but only Axel commenced his training with real swords when he was 7. After Edward killed the mountain without telling Ashra, not only did she not get better, but she started to dislike Edward a little by little, and her mental illness turned into madness. The relationship between the two entered its final stages after that point. Ashra, who had managed to set up a small organization called Shadow Queen, during those years, started using them to cause problems here and there. She started by kidnapping the Lannisters' children, who went out without enough escort to protect them during their time out. Their screams did not die down even for a second during the day, and the dungeons in Storm's End would bring fear to anyone who would enter and hear their screams. Although Edward knew about all this shit, he did not stop her at that time. Edward thought that since he had fought with Ashera not long ago, he should leave her alone for some time. He had given her the mountain to serve as her toy and dog, but Edward was the one who took this toy away. Of course, the Lannister would not sit still as their children got attacked, and Tywin sent his spies to know who did all this. Edward had to meddle in this matter and hide all the traces that could lead to his wife. He already had enough problems, and he did not want to have more ones due to her actions. He did not hide all the traces, though, since Tywin would know that Edward was involved in all this, since Edward was the only one who could hide anything from Tywin. Instead, Edward made the traces end up in the Reach. He faked some pieces of evidence that indicated that the Tyrells were the ones behind this matter, since Edward wanted to end the good relationship between the Westerlands and the Reach. This relationship started years ago because of the lands Edward took from the Reach. The Rose's queen, Olenna, would think of any way to take her lands back, and she saw that an alliance with a Lannister would put enough pressure on Edward. Although it all ended when Olenna's granddaughter got betrothed to Edward's second son, Axel, the tricks back then were a little helpful. After that accident, Tywin instructed that no Lannister would travel without enough escort. He did not want that accident to happen again. Due to this, Ashera's plans got interrupted again, and she could not enjoy torturing her enemies for months, so she started kidnapping the Lannisters' soldiers and small folks from the Westerlands. Edward started to see that Ashera was getting out of the line here, since she was already pregnant with their youngest daughter, Jasmine, but she insisted on continuing what she was doing without any care. Although Edward wanted to stop her and got rid of her organization, he did not do anything because she was pregnant. He was afraid that if Ashera's mental state deteriorated more than that, it would affect their unborn child. So Edward decided to wait till the end of year 289 AC, when their youngest daughter came to the world, before starting his plans to restrain his wife a little. At once, Edward dispatched the Shadow Legion and the agents that he planted in Ashera's organization long ago to get rid of the Shadow Queen organization. This operation continued for a year, since some of those rats were really good at hiding their traces. Although her men were dying here and there, Ashera did not care and continued to torture people here and there. She even started taking small folks from Stormsland, since her men could not go that far to Westerlands anymore. In the middle of year 290 AC, Edward and his family moved to their new capital, Storm's Eye. He thought by changing their home like that and losing her men, Ashera would calm down a little. But nothing went as he wanted. It seemed as if some god was targeting him. Moving to Storm's Eye did not stop Ashera, but it opened a new market for her. At least, with a near million people, she could pick whatever she wanted, since no one would care about losing 10 or so people in this big city. When Edward knew that she started doing all this shit again, he started losing hope in Ashera, but he did not have time to take care of her madness. At that time, he called the men from the east and was preparing for the blood rituals. After the four groups managed to find a simplified version, the ingredients required for those rituals were hard to find. But the thing that made him stop in his tracks for a year and more was the sacrifice he needed to do too. Chapter 166, Unforgivable and Sacrifice. They told Edward that he needed to sacrifice like the hero, Azir al-Hay, and use his wife's heart if he wanted to complete those rituals. Although Edward could describe himself as a madman and cruel one, he could not even think of using his children or wife like that for his benefit by sacrificing them. That was why for nearly 2 years, Edward put those plans to stop. It was only until the two accidents that happened in year 291 AC and 292 AC that Edward made up his mind. After losing all her men, Ashera did not have but her queen guard at the moment, and she could not continue her hobby. Ashera became frustrated for months since she could not move, since she was paranoid that someone was aiming for her life. She even doubted that man was Edward himself and started distancing herself little by little from him. In the last months of year 291 AC, Ashera, who held a party in the keep, suggested to the ladies who attended her party to get a tour around the lake. Unfortunately, Amelia Miniclaw, daughter of Edward's friend Benjamin, apologized because she had something else that needed to get taken care of at that time. Ashera smiled at her on the surface, but after the poor girl left the hall, Ashera instructed one of her queen guard, one of those that was not Edward's spy, to follow her and imprison her in the dungeon. Although Edward wanted to save this poor girl, who was only 16 at that time, he was too late. After he got the message from the group that he asked to monitor Ashera's movement, Edward hurriedly moved his ass in order to save the girl, but he was still late. When he arrived after only a few hours, He found the girl's dead body in a cell. Edward could see how she died unwillingly under his wife's hands. Edward did not know how to explain this matter to his friend. If he got put in Benjamin's place, he would have forsaken their relationship and rebelled against his lord after hearing this news. Edward's only option was to hide this accident by burning the girl's body and killing everyone involved in this accident, especially that motherfucking guard that did not use his head and listened to Ashura. He would send Benjamin on a dangerous mission before he could find out. As for Ashura, Edward decided to take all her guards away without leaving anyone by her side. He warned her that this was her last time he would let her move freely. If she did anything else, he would not mind confining her. Ashura's madness reached the limits after this accident, and she was sure that Edward was after her life as well. He was the one who wanted to kill her. She decided to spread the rumors about the Lannister twins she witnessed back then when Edward allowed Robert to visit his uncles in Estermont. She knew the incest between those two and wanted to spread these rumors, but Edward told her to wait back then. Since Edward wanted to kill her, she would spread these rumors and destroy all her enemies at once. She had hidden a maid inside the keep without anyone noticing, or that was what she thought. In fact, that maid was a member of the Shadow Legion, and Edward planted her around Ashura because he was afraid something like that might happen. After Ashura instructed the maid to spread the rumors and waited for the world's end, what came to her was not the world's end but Edward himself. After the maid reported back to Edward, he got angry because he knew that Ashura was a lost cause at this time, and there was no saving for her. Although he thought about all that, he decided to keep her around for the children. He could not kill his wife, could he? Too. Ashura fell into despair completely after that accident, and Edward estimated that she would die sooner or later if he left her like that. The woman was, after all, his wife that he valued a lot. She was the mother of his beloved children. How could Edward not try to save her and do nothing? So Edward made his most foolish mistake since he came to this world. He thought that the door to Ashura's improvement was her children. After her children visited her multiple times, Ashura saw some improvement, or that was what Edward thought. He did not know that the accident that would make him regret ever marrying Ashura would happen at the start of year 292 AC. When Edward took his 3-year-old young daughter, Jasmine, with him to visit Ashura in her room, the trauma that would cause Jasmine to be afraid for most of her life happened. Edward did not allow any maid or servants to enter Ashura's room, since she was nearly a madwoman at that time. The servants would only leave food or whatever she needed outside her section. That time, Edward decided to eat something with Ashura and his daughter, so he was the one who went outside to get the food. It did not take even 5 minutes, but when he came back, everything was different. He could not believe his eyes. Ashura was holding Jasmine's hands while slapping her face. "How could you say no to your mother? How dare you? Are you planning to kill me as well?" shouted Ashura as she looked at Jasmine's eyes with madness in her eyes while putting her hands on Jasmine's mouth so that the little girl would not scream. Not only that, but she had injured the little girl with a wooden stick. Jasmine was looking at her mother with horror in her eyes and wanted to scream. Looking at Ashura like this, it seemed as if she was the devil or the Mad King himself. Edward could not hold on any longer and sprinted to Ashura's bed and pushed her hard to the ground while holding his daughter in his hands. The girl was screaming loud while burying her head on Edward's shoulder. She had seen death in her mother's eyes. She could not understand much, but she was afraid after seeing her mother looking at her like that and doing all that stuff that hurt her too. Edward tried to calm the little girl, who would not stop crying after what she had been through in her mother's hands. Edward looked at Ashura, who was laughing on the ground with killing intent this time. He lost all hopes this time and would not give Ashura a second chance. After crying for an hour or so, Jasmine finally fell asleep in Edward's hand. Edward at once took her to her room. After that, he called the 4 groups to see him. During those 2 years, Edward had managed to gather all the ingredients needed to perform the blood rituals, and the last requirement was the sacrifice. He needed his wife's heart. Edward, who was hesitant all this time because he could not do something like that to his wife, made his final decision. Chapter 167, Ashura's Ending and William's Ambitions. In the next month, Edward stood in the middle of blood rituals taking place on a deserted island with different hearts from different creatures. The most notable ones are the heart of a wyvern, a white vampire bat, and a hairy ape. Those creatures only existed on the continent of Sithorias. After the accident that happened to Melia, Edward did not wait and sent her father on this mission with Elbert to get the required ingredients from Sithorias. He sent 1,000 men with them so that they could gather all the ingredients. Only an injured Albert and 100 men returned alive from that place, though we will go through this adventure in the future. 3. Meanwhile, Edward asked his men to bring Ashera to him. When she came and saw Edward standing in such a creepy place, she started to become afraid a little in her heart. Her fears defeated her madness for the first time in years, and she spoke the way she did back then when they were just lovers. "Ed, why did you ask them to bring me here?" asked Ashera as she looked around. After what happened with their daughter, Edward confined her alone in her room without allowing anyone to see her. "Don't worry, Ash. Everything would end soon," said Edward as he hugged her, and some tears gathered in his eyes after saying those words. He remembered how he loved this woman back then and promised her to live a good life, but he was the one who would end her life. 3. Ashera looked at Edward's eyes and smiled at him after hearing his words. While both of them were hugging each other, a sorcerer came from behind Ashera and handed Edward the knife required to perform the rituals. Edward was supposed to end Ashera's life with this knife. Edward's tears continued to fall, but he made his decision in his heart. Ashera's death would not just be mercy for him and his children, but it would be a mercy for Ashera herself, who nearly killed their youngest daughter with her own hands. Edward raised Ashera's face with his other hand to kiss her. But before she could enjoy the kiss, a knife passed through her chest and continued to cut the area around her heart. Before she knew it, she could see her heart in Edward's hand before she fell dead on the ground. That was her last breath in this world. After that, Edward, whose feelings nearly crushed him, continued with the rituals. He could not let his wife's death go to waste like that and had to live for his children. If he managed to live after these rituals, not only would he have those powers, but his children, who had his blood in their veins, would enjoy them as well. Back to the group in Winterfell, after Teresa humiliated William and everyone laughed at that, the group finally ended their day filled with events. Edward and his children retreated to the guest house in Winterfell to catch some sleep before joining the feast at night, since they had to attend or the Starks would lose their faces. Before Edward left the courtyard, Teresa stopped him in order to tell him that Corinna and Brienne were about to fight, and she was the one who arranged all that, trying to intimidate her father again. This time, Edward refused without hesitation since he had enough for the day and wanted to have some rest. It had already been a long day, and they could not wait for more than that in the courtyard. As for William, who got his ass kicked by his sister, he just stood there without saying anything the whole time. Everyone probably thinks that William was an idiot and unambitious man by now, but the boy was smart and had some ambitions, which he hid from the rest quite well. In fact, although he behaved like that in front of everyone, he had a dream he wanted to achieve at whatever price. He knew that he would not have any chance to take his father's throne or have a high position in Westeros with his brother's performance, which left him with no hope to compete with him. He was the least talented among his brothers, and he knew that since he always respected what his father told him, admitting your shortcomings makes you think of a way to improve. Even his sister Teresa had a better chance of taking the throne than him. The only one that he could have hoped to defeat was the little Jasmine, since she was only 9 and did not train till this moment. She also did not care about anything in the world because she had Edward as her backup, and no one would dare to make her sad. That was why she did not even learn how to behave like a lady or follow their father around in order to learn anything from him. But William knew that even Jasmine had a chance to take the throne more than himself, since Edward doted on her the most. But William wanted the throne and lands to rule where he would not be at the bottom, and his brother could defeat him and had to come up with a plan if he wanted to succeed. William actually thought that his father would give him some lands in Essex, but he changed his mind since he was the only one of his brothers that Edward did not even send to Essex to train. Actually, Edward did that because he was afraid that his son would escape to the Far East or manage to get a ship to take him to the West one, but because of his ambition, William did not give up and read many books about history. After reading about the Andal invasion of Westeros, William finally came to a decision. The Andals, who affected all the kingdoms except the north, did not know about Westeros before they sailed. They did not know that there was a new continent to the west at that time, and just followed their king on the sea to escape from the Valyrian freehold. But after they came to Westeros, they managed to take the Vale and married into the other existing houses and kingdoms to control most of Westeros. William wanted that as well. He wanted to build his kingdom in a new continent like the Andals, and the first men did before. If he did not have a chance of controlling Westeros, he would find another realm where he would become the king. 6. Chapter 168, Edward's Children and Betrothal. No one knew about William's ambition. Even Edward did not, since William hid it well. How could Edward know everything in this world? He did not realize how intelligent his children were since they were young, and only treated them like normal ones when, in fact, they could end dynasties by their own hands. If Edward was proud of terminating the Targaryens, his children could eliminate 10 Targaryens. William's aside, Raymond was more intelligent than Edward when he was his age, and would probably be the one to force Edward to step down from his position as the Storm King in a few years with his ambitions. Axel was a hell of a fighter, and no one would ever manage to defeat him when he was in his 20s. Although Lionel and Orys looked playful on the outside and had no care about the world, they had the most poisonous mind among Edward's children. It was just that the two did not have the chance to show off in front of the others 5. If anyone could start a civil war in the New Kingdom, Lionel and Orys would be in the first position on the author's list. Although Edward managed to deepen the relationship between his children, no one would know what the future looked like, and the things might change. They would not kill each other, at least, since this was the only thing Edward insisted on the most while raising his children. He taught that the most hateful thing in his eyes was kinslaying, and forbid them of even thinking about something like that. Although to Risa seemed that she did not care about anything except her training, she had a bitch side of her that made the brave Edward a little afraid when he spoke with her. No one knew if she would turn into Cersei or Daenerys in the future with this personality. Only Jasmine did not want anything in this world. No one knew if that would change in the future, though one anyway. The night came, and the feast started in the Great Hall. The hall turned noisy because of all those drunk men and the laughter of the women. Edward asked Ned to go out with him since he wanted to talk to him about an important matter. "Let's go to the cellar. We can talk there," said Ned as he looked at Edward before leading the way to the cellar. They did not take long before they arrived, and Ned invited Edward to take a seat. He then took his seat as well and looked at Edward, waiting for his words. "I will speak directly then, Ned. I want to take your daughter, Arya, as a wife to my son, William. What do you think?" said Edward with a smile, since this was one of the reasons why he came here. He waited for Ned after he said those words. "Isn't William a little young? Why didn't you choose one of your elder ones?" asked Ned as he was puzzled by what Edward said. Although Ned was not like his father, who sought to make allies outside the north, he did not mind if his daughters married one of Edward's sons, since he knew that Edward would take care of them for his sake. He wished he could send Sansa with Edward instead of Arya, though, since Sansa always talked about that in her childhood. Plus, Arya did not behave like a lady at all. You knew that Axel would marry anytime soon. As for Raymond, you probably don't know this, but he is already married, and his son is on the way. He loved a common girl in the castle and annoyed me for days, so I let him marry her in the end. The other two are fucking annoying, and I could not say if they are gay because of their behaviors," said Edward with a calm voice at first but faked an annoyed one at the end. His lying skills were on a different level compared to before. He did not mind saying all this nonsense at all. "What?" shouted Ned as he did not expect to hear all that. Edward did not tell him anything about Raymond's marriage all that time and did not expect the intelligent Raymond to act as his father and marry for love. What shocked him the most was Edward's last words about his two sons, Lionel and Orys. Although he thought that Edward was probably joking about that, it could be true as well. "That is why I chose William for Arya. I wanted to take your daughter, Sansa, with me as well, but I can't do anything until the other two brats want that too. I also wanted to wed Robb and Teresa, but she did not care about anything but training at the moment," said Edward with a sad smile as he looked at Ned's eyes. He preferred to spread his children among the great houses in order to take them under his wing. Robb Stark was a bad choice in his eyes since little Robb had ambitions in his heart, or else he would not think of declaring that he was the king in the north instead of supporting Stannis. If Robb did not make the same idiotic choices in the future when he met the foreign girl, Edward might think about wedding Teresa to him instead of supporting Sansa. 3 Ned thought of Edward's words for some time and saw there would not be any problem if he did what Edward suggested. He would not worry about his daughter in the Kingdom of Storms, at least. She would get to do what she liked as well. "It is fine by me, but I have to ask Catelyn," said Ned with a smile as he nodded his head. He was actually overjoyed to receive this request from Edward, since he trusted Edward more than he did to anyone else. "Fine, let's head back. I have to leave in the morning," said Edward as he got up, since he had said whatever he wanted to say to Ned. Edward saw that he should rest since he would have a long journey the following day. Ned nodded his head, and the two left the cellar and joined the feast at its end. Edward took his children back to the guest house since they had to prepare themselves, especially Jasmine, who was very young the last time Edward took her beyond the wall. In the Great Keep, after Ned Stark and his wife retreated to their chamber, Ned, who was hugging his wife, Catelyn, while she rested her head on Ned's chest, looked at her. Ned decided to tell her what Edward asked him a little earlier to know her opinion. Chapter 169, Ginger Hair, Ygritte. Cat, Edward asked me for a betrothal between Arya and his son, Will.i.am. What do you think? Asked Ned as he looked at the woman in his hands. Catelyn looked at Ned, a little surprised after hearing his words. She would be happy if the one they were talking about was Sansa and not Arya. Why the hell would he ask for Arya and not Sansa? She is the elder daughter, after all, said Catelyn as she did not believe her ears. Any sane man would know who would bring him better benefits between Arya and Sansa. Plus, she did not understand why he wanted her for Will.i.am instead of his other sons. Edward won't force any of his sons and let them choose whoever they wanted. He only asked me that after Will.i.am agreed to his words. Apparently, his son, Raymond, is married for years to a common girl, and no one heard a word about that, said Ned as he shook his head. He was the same as Catelyn and did not expect Edward to choose Arya instead of Sansa. After hearing Ned's words, Catelyn stood up and left the bed. She paced left and right as she did not know how to answer Ned since she would be in trouble after telling this news to her daughter Sansa. Did you suggest to betroth Sansa to any of his sons? Asked Catelyn as she could not bear to see Sansa's crying, especially after teaching Sansa all those lady works. She told Sansa that if she wanted to be a good wife, she had to learn all those things and the poor Sansa did. I did, and he said that would depend on his sons. He will act as a messenger in this matter, said Ned as he did not know what to say about Edward's words. The one troubled the most by those words was none other than Catelyn Stark. She could only sigh and think of a solution in the next month to help Sansa. She did not know that the king would come to Winterfell in the next month and would fuck up her life. What can we do? Just agree to his words, said Catelyn as she got into the bed again in a full mood. She was not in the mood to have a round or two with Ned in the bed. The following morning, Edward took his children, Jon Snow, and his men and moved north towards the wall. It was time to send the criminals to the wall and talk with the Lord Commander, Mormont, about the preparation needed for facing the dead army. On the road, Edward remembered his adopted daughter, Ygritte, who had been silent since they came to Winterfell. She did not even attend the feast held by Lord Stark for Edward and his children. Although Edward took this girl as his adopted daughter when she was only 10, she continued to act like a wilding. Edward did not actually have any problem with that since he liked their way of living, but the time did not need their stubbornness. Edward looked at Jon Snow, who had been looking at the girl since they left Winterfell. It seemed that he got attracted to the girl because of her ginger hair. When it came to this, ginger girls are hot, so Edward could not say anything about that. If he could find a woman a little older from the free folk with ginger hair, he would fuck her for sure. The problem was that any woman at that age would have fucked 100 men by now 3 anyway. Edward wanted to talk to the young girl and see how she was doing. He did not expect her to stay silent when he tried to do that in Storm's Eye, but did not manage to do that. Ygritte, come here, said Edward as he looked at the beautiful girl. He smiled when he saw her eyes. He wished that this girl was his daughter for real. What? Said the girl as she kicked her horse to come close to Edward and spoke rudely like always. Although she lived in a civilized city for 6 years, she did not change her ways. Haha, why are you silent like that? Said Edward with a smile after hearing her words. He always liked to tease this girl like that. None of your business, said the girl as she looked in another direction, refusing to answer his question. Well, she got particularly forced to follow him because Mance Rayder asked her to do that. Edward remembered the first time he contacted the Wilding for the first time. It was only 4 years after Mance Rayder joined the Free Folks. At that time, the man was still a long way from unifying all the tribes, but Edward insisted on meeting him. Edward knew that Mance had already recognized the danger beyond the wall. That was why he moved to unify all the tribes. When Edward contacted Mance, the man only had the Then, Ruddy Hall, and the Lord of Bones. He was still a long way from his dream. After Edward delivered the criminals to the wall after his daughter Jasmine came to this world, he asked Lord Mormont to contact Mance. At first, the Lord Commander refused to do that, and that was the first time that Edward told him about the dead army. He did tell him about the others, though, because he knew that he would not believe him. Edward would ship part of the dragon glass that he paid Stannis to mine from Dragonstone. They made arrows, daggers, spears and even coat their sword with a layer of dragon glass. Edward warned them not to fight them head-on, or they would join the dead. Edward forked a large sum of gold dragons to build a second wall north to the current one. It was not made with magic, though, and the dead could come close and attack it. Although it was like that, it enabled the Night's Watch to decrease the numbers of the dead by a lot. The second wall was not as tall as the first, since doing something like that would make Edward penniless. But Edward and his men managed to raise 70 feet tall wall, a tenth of the first one. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170, Mance Rayder. Anyway, after the Night's Watch contacted Mance Rayder and carried Edward's letter, they decided on a meeting in Hardhome. Edward knew that the Wilding would have killed any ranger who tried to come close to Hardhome without Edward's letter. Edward took a ship to Hardhome, which was just a small settlement for Mance's forces at that time. Edward's huge ship surprised the group when they arrived and docked there. When Edward and Clelyn, who Edward told nearly everything, landed, the free folks looked at them with hostility. The Lord of Bones came personally to take Edward and his men to meet Mance. When Edward entered the tent, he could see Mance, Tormund of Ruddy Hall, and Styr of Then waiting there. He greeted them with a smile, since he knew that the only people the free folks actually hated were the group of the Night's Watch. "I see you are doing well here after leaving the wall," said Edward as he smiled at Mance and taking his seat, ignoring everyone in the tent. Although the free folks were strong, Edward was sure that he could beat this group with Clelyn. Only the giants could fuck with him, and Mance did not manage to get them to his side yet. "Even beyond the wall, I can still hear about your news, Storm King," said Mance with his grim expression. He did not know what Edward wanted, but he knew for sure that his forces would all die with the first small clash with Edward and his forces. Edward had already threatened him in his letter that he sent with the Night's Watch. "Don't act like that. I am actually here to support you," said Edward with a smile after hearing Mance's hesitation and fears. "We don't need any help for those who lived in the south," said Tormund with his daring voice, as if he wanted to challenge Edward. Edward looked at him and punched him directly, not waiting for a second thought. Those fucking Wilding bastards only believed in strength. Although Edward liked Tormund's personality, it was not the right time for him to listen to his words. It was freaking cold here. Even after training himself and his children for years, he could not bear this cold for long. He wanted to end this conversation and leave as soon as possible, and did not have time for Tormund. Tormund, who received Edward's punch, stood up at once and tried to attack him, but Mance's voice stopped him. "Tormund!" shouted Mance, as he knew that if something like that happened, they would all die. Although he would not kneel in front of Edward, attacking him means that they were forsaking all the free folks in this place. "Wise choice," said Edward with a smile. He then turned serious as he looked at everyone in the tent. "Now, let's discuss the important things. Have you met the others or any white yet?" said Edward with a grieved tone. Everyone in the tent changed their expression after hearing that. The group did not expect a Southern King to know about the situation in the north that well. "Looking at your expression, I am sure that you met them then. Listen to my plan here, since we don't have much time. You have to gather all the Wilding under your command, Mance, as fast as you can. I already purchased the island of Skagus from Lord Stark. Every 2 years, my ships will come to Hardhome and move your people there. Don't look at me like that and listen, goddammit. If anyone refuses to listen, I will kill him and burn his body, since it's better than adding him to the whites," said Edward with a commanding tone as he looked at those in the room. He had made his preparation a long time ago. He purchased the island from Ned after giving the North a hell of benefits. After that, Edward started cleaning the island from its inhabitants. Those cannibals, who had lost the North's trust long ago, got all killed by Edward and his men. Of course, Edward would not tell something like that to Ned and hid it well till this moment. Of course, they would not just agree to take orders from a Southern King, but Edward did not care about anyone except Mance at the moment. "We won't kneel," said Mance as he realized the situation they were in right now. He knew that Edward wanted to save them by saying those words. "I don't fucking need you to kneel. Just listen to my commands till that disaster die. But you all have to swear that you won't raid again. I will find some work for you to do for the time being." I will send my men to turn Hardhome into a fortress that even the whites could not do anything about," said Edward with an authoritative tone. After hearing that they would not need to kneel, the group calmed down a little. They all looked at Mance to hear his words since they did not know anything about the South. "Why are you helping us?" asked Mance as he did not see any reason for Edward to help them. "We are all men. I am helping you to save your people, so you have to listen to me. I don't want any meaningless sacrifice. You understand?" asked Edward since he wanted to finish this conversation as fast as possible. "I will come in 1 year to hear your reply and take the first group with me," said Edward as he left with his men after saying those words. After that conversation, everything moved in the direction that Edward wanted, but with a little difference. The free folks only agreed to send the women and children to Skaggis with some men, while the rest decided to stay in Hardhome to defend it. At that time, Edward saw the young Ygritte and told Mance that he would take her as his daughter to make Mance and the wildling rest assured. Mance, who knew the traditions of the South, saw that would help them a lot in case Edward decided to abandon them. They would depend on Ygritte to notify them at that time. "We will go the wall to meet the Night's Watch. Is that what is making you upset?" said Edward with a smile on his face as he looked at the girl. "I don't care," said Ygritte with a red face, making Edward laugh out loud. "Why don't you go and visit your people in Skaggis? You could follow us to Winterfell after you make sure they are fine," said Edward as he kicked his horse to move forward. Chapter 171, News from King's Landing. Ygritte looked at Edward's back a little before kicking her horse to change her direction. She would visit her people in Skaggis before joining Edward again. Jon Snow's eyes did not leave her and wished that he could ask Edward to join her. At that time, Jon Snow was just a teenager. 2 days after Edward left Winterfell, the letter from King's Landing finally arrived in Winterfell, making Ned change his expression, especially after he remembered what Edward said. In the Godswood, Catelyn Stark, who had just received the message sent by the Raven from King's Landing, came to see Ned and tell him about the bad news she just received. Catelyn wore a sad expression after reading the message since she knew how much her husband loved his foster father and respected him more than he did to his real one, Rickard Stark. "All these years, and I still feel like an outsider when I come here," said Catelyn as she looked at the weirwood heart tree behind Ned, who was cleaning his sword. She always had thought she did not fit the North and should have married someone from the South. Well, the author thought of the same thing when you have 5 northern children. "You are not an outsider," said Ned with a smile as he continued cleaning his sword. "I wonder if your old gods agree with you," said Catelyn with a smile as she looked at Ned. "Your gods have all the rules," said Ned with a mocking smile and looked at the message in Catelyn's hands. Catelyn's expression changed after seeing her husband's eyes. She would tell him the news that would make him sad. "I am so sorry, my love," said Catelyn with a sad expression since she knew how the coming news would hurt her love. "Tell me," said Ned as his expression changed a little as he had a bad feeling in his heart about this. He remembered what Edward told him before he left for the wall. He wondered if the storm that Edward predicted had started already. "A raven came from King's Landing. Jon Arryn is it? Fever took him. I know he was like a father to you," said Catelyn with a sorrowful look as she looked at Ned. "What about your sister and the boy?" asked Ned as his heart started beating hard with Edward's words flying by his ears. "They both are well, thank gods," said Catelyn with a sigh since she cared about her sister a lot. The raven brought more news. "The king rides at Winterfell with the queen and all the rest of them," said Catelyn as she looked at Ned with a grief expression on her face as she understood what that meant. On the other hand, Ned was on another sky, thinking about Edward's words and linking them to what he heard from his wife. He thought about the different possibilities, but Ned was not a great thinker, and everyone had to admit that. Ned did not reach the conclusion that Jon Arryn might have been killed and did not die a normal death. But he understood why our Robert was coming this far north. He did not want to get involved in the shit in King's Landing, especially after hearing Edward's words and knowing the danger in that place. "If he is coming this far north, there is one thing that he is after," said Ned with a troubled look. Although Robert was his friend and all, Ned started to hate Robert long ago before taking the throne. If Robert cherished Ned's sister long ago, the two might have got married before all the shit happened that resulted in her death. Ned's family might still be alive until this moment then. Not to mention that Robert did not go with Ned when he needed him the most to save Lyanna, but Ned refused to stay by Robert's side after knowing his intentions about the rest of the Targaryens. Ned had promised his sister to keep her son safe, but Robert would kill the boy if he found out. That was why Ned decided to stay in the north since then. "You can always say no, Ned," said Catelyn with a sad expression on her face. She did not want her husband to go to King's Landing and die like his father or got schemed against and assassinated like his brother. Ned did not say anything, but he agreed with his wife's words since he did not want to witness the shit in King's Landing. "We just prepared a feast for a Storm King, and now we have to prepare another feast for another king. Winterfell became boisterous lately," said Catelyn with a smile, trying to lighten the mood after seeing the look on her husband. Ned smiled after hearing his wife's words, although this smile held more worry than it appeared. Ned was afraid for his children's lives since they would be in danger if he did not stay in Winterfell. A month passed in a blink of an eye after Lord and Lady Stark's conversation in the Godswood. After the month-long period, the king arrived at Winterfell, and everything went exactly like the canon without any change. Even Ned himself did not tell Robert about Edward's being in the north since he thought Edward would take more time to come back. Edward only decided to avoid Robert's first night in Winterfell since he did not want to have any relationship with Bran's accident. Although the blood rituals did their work and hide him from the three-eyed raven's eyes, Edward did not want to take any risk. He returned with Ben Stark, who was already on his way to return to Winterfell. Edward decided to delay the man a little with him before traveling together. After Edward handed the criminals to Lord Commander Mormont and giving him enough instructions to fight the Whites beyond the wall, he decided to return to Winterfell. Mormont told him a piece of interesting news, though. It seemed that Mance had managed to unite all the clans beyond the wall and took them to Hardhome. From there, the Night's Watch and the Free Folk started attacking the Wandering Whites in order to decrease their numbers. Edward was planning to kill the Night King's army a little by little. He gave the men in the Night's Watch small bombs made from wildfire. He instructed the Night's Watch and the Free Folks to use them immediately if one man fell in the battle. With this, Edward would cut the Night King's supplies for his army. 1. Chapter 172, A Talk with Benjen Stark. Anyway, after Edward finished what he came to the wall for, he traveled with Benjen Stark. During their way back, Benjen had a conversation with Edward. "Since you know, Edward, why did not you tell the others?" said Benjen as he saw with his own eyes the plenty of sacrifices that Edward made. He was talking about the danger behind the wall. He did not know why Edward did not tell his brother or the other southern lords. "Your brother won't believe me if he does not see it with his own eyes, since no one would believe that. I am not ready to sacrifice more men to bring one of those monsters to this realm. I already gave Ned a hint, but he did not listen. The other southern lords are busy with their schemes and won't care about that unless the north fail first," said Edward as he shook his head while looking at Benjen in the eyes. "If we tried more, we might succeed in doing that. Don't you agree?" said Benjen as he thought it was unfair, especially since Edward was the one who was doing all the work while those southern lords stayed in their castle eating and drinking without any care about the world. "It is better without them, actually. Those fellows might use this chance in their favor and smuggle some whites to the realms to attack their enemies. I don't have time to care about some children playing hide and seek," said Edward with a smile as he looked at the sky. He did not want those petty lords to busy themselves with what was happening in the north since he wanted them to kill each other. Edward was not afraid of the Night King at the moment since he would have a plan in 2 years or 3. The rituals that Edward performed awakened the hot blood from his Targaryen side and reinforced it. His blood was so pure as the first Valyrians who became Dragon Lords long ago. Although it would take him some time for the blood to assimilate completely in his body, he would have the ability to hatch a dragon's egg at that time. Not only did Edward's blood change like that, but his children's blood changed as well. Edward was preparing for the time when he would have the ability to ride a dragon. He had managed to buy 9 dragon eggs from the Shadowlands beyond Ashay with his good relationship with the Shadowbinders. One Benjen, who was beside Edward at the moment, looked at him and could not help but praise Edward more in his mind. At first, he thought Edward was like those southern lords who did not care about anything but their benefits, especially since Edward was the most winner of the rebellion. But after getting to know him more, Benjen was sure that the most suitable man for his sister was none other than Edward. Not only was Edward loved by his men and people, but he had foresight well enough to realize the real danger in front of everyone while the rest of the lords were petty in their actions. "We will still need their help. We can't fight the Whites alone, Edward," said Benjen as he did not know about the Night King as well. Edward kept this information for himself since no one would believe him if he said there was a Night King controlling everything from the shadows. The free folks did not know much about this information since the Night King did not appear by himself till this point. They knew about the White Walkers, though. If I could not manage to find a way to help us here, do you think those idiots that thought about all these things as myths would help? They are just small sheep that waited to be slaughtered," said Edward with a knowing smile. He was sure that most lords would try to escape from Westeros if this news came to light. Cersei, herself, would have done such a thing if Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen failed to stop that army. Benjen started to understand Edward's meaning after hearing those words and knew for sure that the ones who would suffer if they allowed those whites to attack the realm were just the small folks who did not know anything. "Huh? Do what you want," said Benjen, since he was not a great thinker like Edward. He knew that Edward had put a plan to defeat those things, and he did not want to fuck everything up with his idiocy. He decided to do what Edward asked him to do since he knew that was the right thing to do at the moment. "Let's hurry up. I don't want to miss meeting my fool brother and mess up with him and his Lannister family. It had been a long time since I punched him in the face and injured him. I will be happy to do that again," said Edward as he was fantasizing about how he was going to mess Robert's life up. He refused to meet Robert all those years since he already used him well until that point. Robert would die this year anyway, and it would be Edward's time to torture Joffrey after that. The moment that Edward had been waiting for had finally come. Edward wanted to torture 3 people at the moment, but after they reached their final momentum before taking them down. Yet, that was what Edward wanted. Those 3 were Joffrey Baratheon, Ramsay Bolton, and Euron Greyjoy. Edward had planned suitable deaths for every one of them, and he would enjoy seeing that aid. After hearing Edward's words, Benjen could not help but smile and laugh out loud. It was not only Ned who hated Robert for their sister's death. Benjen, who was the closest to Lyanna and stayed the most with her in Winterfell, was heartbroken after hearing the news about her death. He resented Robert for years after that and wanted to go to King's Landing and challenge him to a fight where he could avenge his sister. But he did not, as he respected his sister's wishes and his big brother. That was why Benjen decided to join the Night's Watch, where he could defend the realm and clear his head. But after hearing Edward's words, those memories came back to him. He knew that only Edward could attack Robert at the moment. If anyone tried to do that, they would find their body in the wild after that day. That was if Robert did not decide to flatten their heads with his hammer first. 3. Chapter 173, Slapping Joffrey's Face. As for Edward, he was the Storm King with his many titles and conquered almost half of Essos. Even when Robert tried to pull some things under the Lannisters' influence to get the part that Edward took from the Crown lands, with only a small threat from Edward, Robert and his Lannister's wife stopped in their tracks. Cersei, who still remembered what happened that day clearly in her head, wanted nothing more than eating Edward alive. Not only did Edward humiliate her husband, whom she loved at that time, father, and brother at that time, but he injured them as well and destroyed the Lannisters' legacy. She always tried to hold to her Lannister motto and pay their debt, but she could not find any chance, especially after Edward destroyed her father's army, who tried to play tricks around his lands. The only one that Robert was afraid of at that moment was Edward. That made him grow to love the power, and he loved his position as the king, although he did not work enough to keep that position. He only let the others take care of things for him. Since Edward did not send a raven to Winterfell to inform them about his return, Ned Stark and the fellows did not know that he would come back that fast from the wall, since the distance should have taken him nearly 1 month and a half to go and return. Edward did that to fuck up with the Lannister and Robert, since he did not see or humiliate them for more than a decade, and he missed that good time. He forgot that he had done something like that indirectly, though, by sending their army that tried to provoke Edward's lands as corpses. When the watchmen on Winterfell's walls saw Edward's escort riding to the city from afar, they did not seem alarmed at all, even after seeing more than 200 men closing in towards the castle. They did not act in a different way, as if the coming group belonged were the Stark's men instead. Since they did not know of this serious problem and the fight between Edward and Robert, they acted as they always did when Edward and his men came to Winterfell. The leader had just sent a word to Lord Stark to let him know of Edward's arrival. The men in Winterfell were more familiar with Edward, since they would see him every 4 years or so. That was why they allowed him and his men to enter the castle directly without even stopping him at the gate to ask Lord Stark for his opinion. Edward knew where he should head first, since he knew what should be happening at this time. He knew that he could find Tyrion Lannister and his nephew near the stables, so Edward decided to head there and slap Joffrey as well. Although Edward met Tyrion more than once before, When Tyrion visited Storm's Eye and treated Tyrion differently than the other Lannister, he did not try to recruit Tyrion to his side too. He knew Tyrion would always try to save his family if Edward took over Westeros, and Edward would never allow that. How could he leave any Lannister alive, except his niece? In the stables, Joffrey, who saw his uncle sleeping with the pets and dogs, decided to use this chance to mock him after seeing him like that. "Better looking than the bitches you used to, uncle," said Joffrey with a mocking smile on his face. "My mom has been looking for you. We ride for King's Landing today," said Joffrey as he looked away from his uncle's eyes. "Before we go, you will find Lord and Lady Stark and offer your sympathy," said Tyrion as he wondered how this boy was related to any of his two parents. Joffrey was not like a Baratheon since he did not have the strength to support that claim, nor he had the brain like the Lannisters to prove that he was related to them. "What could my sympathy do to them?" said Joffrey as he looked at his uncle as if he was an idiot. "None. But it is expected of you. Your absence has already been noted," said Tyrion trying to explain to the idiot in front of him. "The boy means nothing to me. I can't stand the wailing of women," said Joffrey with an arrogant attitude as he looked at the hound behind him. But when he turned his head back to Tyrion, the latter slapped his face with his small hands. "One word and I will hit you again," said Tyrion as he threatened the boy by telling him that. "I will tell my mother," wailed the young Joffrey, and Tyrion raised his hand to slap him again, but the one and only Storm King arrived at that moment and got down from his horse, getting the attention of everyone present. The hound put his hand on his sword for any unexpected danger. When Edward got down from his horse, everyone looked at him as if they were looking at a ghost. They got surprised since they did not expect the Storm King to arrive today. They did not expect to meet him in Winterfell since they tried to avoid that. The letter got sent to Winterfell after Edward left the place. Of course, the group heard that Edward visited Winterfell in the past month, but they did not expect him to come back this fast. The reason why the group did not want to stay in Winterfell for more than 4 days and making them want to leave was that they did not meet Edward. As for Tyrion, he decided to visit the wall this time to see Edward since he wanted to have a talk with him. "Oh, Tyrion. You are here and hating my nephew at that," said Edward as he came close to the two with a weird smile on his face. "He was saying nonsense since he woke me up," said Tyrion with a smile as he looked at Edward. In his eyes, only Edward could be the true king in Westeros. Robert was only a drunken fat man that did not fit to be on the throne. His nephew was a sadist bastard, while his father was too smart for his own good and got defeated by Edward multiple times already. "I was not," said Joffrey, but before he could complete his words, he got hit again with a slap that was much harder. This time it was Edward who did that. You all could not imagine how Edward had waited to do that. He had always hated Joffrey's character from the show and wanted to hide him like that. Chapter 174, Recruiting the Hound. "Did not you listen to your uncle earlier? Go and whine to your mother and tell her that the Storm King is here, and he would have a talk with her and your other uncle before you leave," said Edward as he saw the fearful expression on the boy's face and was satisfied. Although Edward wanted his sons to do that for him, he could not hold back when he saw his face and hide him directly. He had other plans for Joffrey and Ramsay Bolton, and he would like to play that game with them. The Hound, who stayed silent since Edward came here and did not even defend his prince, looked at Edward and did not say anything since he knew that he could not beat Edward and would probably be asking for his own death if he raised his sword, not to mention the army behind Edward. Plus, he knew the one who avenged him and killed his brutal brother was none other than Edward. His brother was a ghost haunting him in his dreams when he was a child, but the Hound heard how Edward captured and humiliated him. He even heard that the Mountain only died after years of his fall on Edward's hands, and he was tortured all that time. He could not explain how he wanted to thank Edward for removing that parasite from the world, although he wanted to be the one who did that. The boy ran after hearing Edward's words while looking back every now and then. He was probably swearing in his heart to tell his mother about what happened to him that day and ask her to avenge him since he was his mama's boy. He did not know that not he nor his mother could touch Edward anymore. Edward believed that he won this war long ago after all the preparations that he made. He was only waiting for the good show to start and enjoy a little more before ending this game, which was in its final stage. Even Tywin could not do anything against him in war, and Tywin himself knew that. With the soldiers from the New Kingdom and the Reach alone, Edward had more soldiers than all the realm and could take Westeros by force if needed. He was delaying that matter, though, since he did not want to sacrifice his men when he could let the other do that for him. He would be the final winner in the end anyway. If Tywin wanted to win, he had only two options in front of his eyes. The first was to continue scheming against Edward, and he might succeed in the end if he managed to convince someone to go against Edward and kill him in his sleep or something, but the chance was minimal since Edward's men got filtered more than once. The second was to get Edward on his side by marriage, and that was what Edward thought Tywin would do since he had no other choice. But Edward would get more surprised by Tywin's shamelessness at that time. He would not expect Tywin to go as far as that, and Edward would not stop laughing in his throne hall when he would receive Tywin's proposal. He would stand up to salute the man for his darings too anyway. After the boy had disappeared from their eyes, Edward turned to the Hound. Edward looked at the man in front of him with some interest in his eyes. Edward was actually the Hound's fan and liked his style. He practiced a lot in his previous life to curse in every sentence as the Hound did, but he could not do it well like the man. "I did not know. Why are you staying with that idiot?" asked Edward as he looked at the Hound with interest in his eyes. He was actually referring to two idiots, not one. The other was Robert, of course. "I need gold to eat," said the Hound as if he did not care about Robert or his son. He had lost his ambitions long ago after Edward killed his brother. He wanted to eat and enjoy his life at the moment. "Come with me then. You are just wasting your time here. You know who has the most gold in this land, don't you?" said Edward with a smile on his face, getting a weird look from everyone, especially Tyrion Lannister, who saw Edward recruiting one of their men in front of him like that. "You mean it?" asked the Hound with a non-caring attitude, but he wanted to check if Edward was truly recruiting him right now. "I do," said Edward with a smile. The Hound saw the look in Edward's eyes and knew at once that Edward was serious about this matter. "Fuck it then, I agree," said the Hound, who started taking everything, indicating that he worked for the crown and threw them to the ground as if they were not his anymore. Edward liked that a lot and could not help but admire the man's style more and more. "Haha, good. Follow me for now. We will find you a place when we return to Storm's Eye," said Edward with a laugh after experiencing the Hound's attitude with his eyes. Wait. Are you serious?" said Tyrion with amazement in his eyes. He was about to insult the Hound for following every order given to him by Joffrey just now, but what was the situation right at the moment? The Hound had abandoned Joffrey and everything the next moment, just like that. "What the fuck did you think would happen?" mocked the Hound after he heard Tyrion's words. If he could find someone as rich as Edward to serve, why would he need the Lannister? "I need a drink. I could not take it anymore," said Tyrion as he moved away from the group with a perplexed expression on his face. Edward could only smile after seeing this scene. He did not expect to have the ability to recruit one of the strongest men in Westeros with just a few words like that, but he should since he knew how the Hound acted. Edward returned to Winterfell to make things difficult for his brother, Robert, who could not use his left hand anymore after Edward pinned him with a dagger back then. He wanted to see if he could do the same to his right hand as well. Edward did not forget to fuck with a Lannister as well. He wanted to blow up Jaime Lannister's balls since he did not need them anymore after having 3 children already with his wife's sister. But Edward did not want to cause trouble to Ned Stark in this place since Edward would have a way to do that in the future. He wanted to see Cersei's and Tywin's expressions when he did that. Chapter 175, Meeting the Lannisters. Ned Stark, who was with his wife in their son's room, Bran, who almost died at the moment, tried to apologize to the woman for leaving her and deciding to follow Robert to King's Landing. If he did not hear the news about Jon Arryn's death, nor did he receive the message from Jon's wife, Lysa Arryn, he would have listened to Edward and stayed in Winterfell. But how could Ned do that at the moment when he knew that his foster father might have got killed by the Lannisters' hands? Ned came close to his wife, who was crying near her son's bed, trying to hold her hands to console her. But she did not allow it and shoved his hands away and spoke. 17 years ago, you rode off with Robert Baratheon. You came back a year later with another woman's son. Now, you are leaving again," said Catelyn as her tears did not stop for a second since she knew about her son's accident. And at the moment, her husband was notifying her that he would leave her in this situation and follow the fat pig, Robert, to King's Landing. "I have no choice," said Ned with a stiff voice as he looked at his wife's pained expression. "That is what all men say when honor goes. That is what you tell your families and yourselves. You do have a choice, and you have made it," said Catelyn with sorrow in her voice when she remembered the moment when her husband came to take her with Jon in his hands. Ned found it hard and tried to reassure her by calling her name, but she refused to let him hold her hand. He was about to speak more to her but got stopped by a knock on the door. The messenger from Winterfell's wall had finally arrived. Ned left his wife and stood up to open the door. When he opened it, the soldiers bowed a little and then started to speak. "My lord, the captain sent me to notify you about this. He ordered me to tell you that the Storm King had arrived at Winterfell not long ago. He had already entered the castle," said the man as he waited for his lord's order. Ned, who heard the soldier's words, could not help but sweat from fear and had a change in expression as his face turned red from frustration, especially when he knew that a problem might happen in Winterfell due to this. He was afraid that Edward would meet Robert before he could arrive and that he was too late to save the situation. Even Catelyn, who was still crying near the bed, stopped crying a little since she knew that this might affect the rest of her children. "Go at once and call the rest of the men and follow me to where Edward and Robert are. Hurry up," said Ned with a shout as he left the room and his wife to solve this problem. Unfortunately for him, although Edward did not target Robert first, he still went to the Lannisters, who nearly killed Bran, then went to console his mother. Near the guest house in Winterfell, Edward rode his horse with his children and men following behind him. When he got down from his horse, he could see clearly a blonde woman standing in front of the gate while holding Edward's pussy nephew in her hands, consoling him after receiving Edward's slap. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it was the fucking Cersei Lannister. Edward smirked when he saw her like that. He could finally see the good bitch of Game of Thrones. Although he could see clearly the hate and hostility in her eyes, Edward could also see the fear that was clear as the sun. She was only waiting there to pretend that she was brave and did not fear him. Standing next to her was her brother. The one who fucked her every time they had a chance. Edward closed the distance to the group with a hound and the rest of his men following behind him. Oh, if it wasn't the good-for-nothing queen and her Kingslayer brother. It had been a lot since I saw both of you. How are your balls, Kingslayer? Said Edward with a smile as he looked at the two Lannister twins while mocking them. Cersei's and Jaime's expressions changed after hearing Edward's words. Although they knew that Edward did not give a shit about the two of them, the North was still in the realm of the Six Kingdoms, and he should respect them here. Cersei had an idea at this point and decided to use it at once. "You will regret saying those words, men," said Cersei as she longed for this moment since that day. She thought that even if Lord Stark had been Edward's friend, he would side with him and attack Edward if he did not want to go against Robert and the rest of the kingdoms. She thought that with the 200 men they brought with them and the forces belonging to the north, she could kill Edward and his family here. After hearing her words, the Lannisters' soldiers around her, since you could not call them the Crown's army as everyone knew where their loyalty was, tried to surround Edward while raising their swords. It seemed that everyone thought so little of Edward and his men, since they did not kill enough men in Westeros for many years. Edward did not mind reminding them of those facts and why he got the title of cruel in the first place. Although Edward did not fight anyone after killing Rhaegar and injuring Robert in King's Landing, since he thought that as a king, he should play from the shadows, Edward was not like Robert, who did not train himself for 15 years. Robert had turned into that fat pig who waited for his slaughter. Edward saw that the only thing that could save him in his darkest time was his own strength. That was why he continued with his fucking hell training with his sons and men. Responding to Cersei's provocations, Edward did not even raise his sword and only waved his hand to his men. Like lions that had been caged for a long time and just saw the sun's light after years of darkness, Edward's men and his children took out their swords and started killing and skinning the pigs directly. Even the Hound participated in this battle, which was a little surprising as he was one of those men not long ago. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.